Good morning, everybody. Let's kick it off. I'm Razvan Radu, Deputy Head of Unit, the Publication Office Portal in Luxembourg, and together with
Florian Barthélemy, part of the SEMIC team, organizing today's and tomorrow's event.
So we welcome you today to this session. We start with the most important information. If you haven't managed to connect to the Wi-Fi, you're not the only one. There is an exclamation sign at the end. I missed it twice as well. And the page might be unavailable because probably a lot of people try to connect now. But going a little bit to the top, why are we here today? We invited you to join us for a session, a workshop, an informative workshop, hopefully dynamic and interesting for you at the end of the day, on AI around interoperability. Has anyone among you been to another SEMIC conference before? How many? Wow. We'd rather have people coming back. That's good. It means you were not disappointed previously. And all the newcomers, welcome. Hopefully see you next year as well. And I know it was a child dream of you to be in an interoperability conference. It sounds very fancy, but... so what do we see today? For us, it's important to get you at the end of the day with inspiration, going back to your company, to your organization, and tell the stories you learned today. Share the experience, because this is why we brought these people today from academia, from the public service, from companies, to share their pains, their challenges, their lessons learned, and their success or failure in developing interoperability solution, in using AI for interoperability, and eventually, and we have some presentation about that, how can interoperability itself can push AI solutions to become better. So for us, discoverability of this knowledge it's the outcome, the most important objective for you today. A little bit of the housekeeping rules. We won't keep you the whole day. The whole day is finished before the Belgium game starts at 6, be assured. But here, for this panel, for this workshop, I think we plan to finish around 1 o'clock. We'll have, though, 2 parts, and you will have half an hour coffee, plenty of coffee. In the first part, from, 9, it's a little bit past 9, to 11, we'll have 3 speakers and then a panel, and a little bit the same on the second part. The questions will be mainly taken during the panel. I think if we are not late, we will take 1 burning question after each presentation from the audience on site. Hello to everybody online, I forgot to say, but everybody online can interact through Slido. I'll say it in a minute, and you can drop your questions there and interact through Slido with us during the panel. That's the Slido information, and this is the QR code. We will show it once again into when the panel starts. You can take the photo now or connect now, or later during the session.
And Slido will be used for 2 things: for the audience on site and online, of course, to ask questions. On site, you will also be invited, of course, to raise your hand and to express your question immediately. And it will also be used for us to ask you a couple of questions after each panel.
Absolutely. So we will, for the questions here, just say it because it's always important for people online. We'll come with the micro to you, or we'll repeat the question so that people online can also hear what the question is. And this being said, what do we have at the menu, Florian?
Yeah, so for part 1, we'll start really from the angle of AI for interoperability. So how AI brings value, some benefits to how we deal with interoperability today and the big challenges that we have. For example, the scalability of interoperability, which is mostly human-driven at the moment. Can AI come to support this to make it more scalable? So those are the type of things that we'll look into, and the first parts will really show concrete examples of different organizations who are dealing with this, with tested and put your hands dirty trying to get concrete results out of AI for interoperability. And for this, we'll have 4 presentations in the morning. Yeah, you see the different speakers on screen now. And we'll kickstart with 2 Finnish colleagues. Thank you for joining today, Antti Helen and Anna-Marie Wallenberg. Anna-Marie is a doctor in cognitive science at the University of Helsinki, as well as a lecturer focusing on AI and human interactions. And she's also, of course, a senior specialist at the Ministry of Finance in Finland, where she focuses on scientific and ethical matters in around AI. On his side, Antti is also an advisor to the Ministry of Finance on EU legislative affairs, and with a deep focus actually in the past years on data regulations, looking into especially AI use cases and automation in public administrations. So they will both talk about their concrete cases in Finland, what they have put together, and yeah, with that being said, the floor is yours, Anna-Marie, Antti.
Good morning, huomenta in Finnish. Let me see whether this works. So thank you for the organizers. It's really wonderful for being here, and thank you for all of your work. And so today, Antti and I, we thought that we would say something about the practical implementation of interoperability by using AI. As we work in a department, public sector ICT, which steers the digitalization in Finland, and that's why we also have this very concrete understanding of the ways how these things should be probably addressed, at least countries such as Finland. So if we kind of take an overview, of course, when we start to talk about the interoperability in the European context, we also typically refer to the AIF, where the idea is somehow to build this framework of 4 layers, at least 4 layers, to somehow manage to govern the interoperability, for example, in public sector work, so that all these layers would communicate and interact nicely and beautifully. So the ideal behind the AIF is often expressed as an idea that the interoperability model that is described by the model is applicable to all digital public services, and it is some kind of integral element of the interoperability by design paradigm. However, we would like to point out today with Antti that in countries such as Finland, which is probably the most legalist country in the world, there is this kind of, I'm not sure whether or not the tension is the correct term, but there are certain aspects that should be taken into account. And given that we have this like 15 minutes in the spotlight today, I would like to propose, Antti, you to continue with the concrete cases and also explain the problems that we are addressing.
Okay, yeah, it just works off the bat. Excellent. Yeah, good morning, everyone. On my behalf as well, like I said, I'm Antti Helen from the Finnish Ministry of Finance as well, and here I'm going to explain and go through some of the concrete things that we've been piloting and experimenting with artificial intelligence with regards to public administration, with some there's some interconnectedness with the theme of the SEMIC conference, of course, being interoperability. Although I will give a slight disclaimer, which is that, as you will see, when we set out to examine and pilot these different use cases, interoperability perhaps wasn't the foremost thing in our mind. The foremost thing in our mind probably was, or I will know for a fact, was being more efficient, saving money, because that's the word of the day these days, is trying to save as much money in public administration as possible. When we're talking about public services in Finland specifically, and not just public services, but like the very core functions of public administration itself, like drafting new laws, which is something that I do on a regular basis, we have like very strict requirements, these kind of top-down requirements on what is possible and what isn't possible when doing things. Like Anna-Mari alluded to, like we have a very strong focus on the legal basis and the legality of everything that we are doing. It's also written in the Constitution itself, which gives us like, we have to take these things into consideration then when we are using artificial intelligence, because especially when it comes to these very new technologies and technologies that have potentials for errors and hallucinations, we can't use the outputs as is. We have to have some kind of refinement process or a filtering process or an examination process before we can actually proceed to using whatever the AI system has produced for us. Of course, as the technology develops and we kind of adapt to how it works and how input should work and so on, this will probably become less common or less of a concern. So again, like the legal considerations are like at a very concrete level. Like these are the kind of guidelines or rules that we have always tried to communicate to our colleagues in public administration when they come to us and, hey, we would like to try AI on this, or we would like to try AI on that. These are the kind of common basis or the common principles that we always start with, which is that you have to have the appropriate amount of skepticism for this kind of new technology, because there's also a lot of hype going on. So you don't need to, and you shouldn't take all the marketing speak at face value. There could be that your use case just isn't really a fertile one for the use of AI right now. You can't use confidential or personal data as inputs, because at least as of yet, we don't have our own completely publicly owned systems or models. So we have to bear in mind that we won't have full control of the inputs that we are using in the model, if we're talking about models, for instance. But we are like the stewards of that information, because it has been entrusted to us in the public administration. We are like relied on to treat that information appropriately and not abuse it. Like I mentioned earlier, we need to review outputs before we use them because of the potential for error. Also, it's important to remember that especially at this stage, like I said, there's a lot of marketing hype going on. It's important not to get locked into a certain product or a certain vendor. That's going to become very expensive very fast later on. And of course, in the future, we're also going to have the requirements from the AI to consider, which I believe is something that is going to be discussed later today. So keep your eyes posted on that. Okay, let's talk about actual use cases. When in Finland you want to draft a new law or any kind of like significant project, you have to have a public consultation. The minimum amount is usually about 6 weeks. So you have to put it up for on a public platform, and then everyone can come and give their position or their opinion or their comments on the proposal. It's not unlike like the have your say procedure or the portal. But what happens with these is that you can get hundreds of messages on these comments. Some of them may be more valuable than others, to be honest. And it's a lot of work, because you are supposed to go through every single comment. And the comments can be multiple pages, or like 20 pages per comment. And you're supposed to go through all these comments and then create a synthesis. Because the synthesis is what the people who are actually passing the law in Parliament, they're going to read the synthesis. They're not going to read the 3,000 pages of comments, which makes sense, of course. So to expedite this kind of process and to reduce the amount of work, we're working on a pilot, which is still very much in the early experimental stage, is using Gen AI to create these syntheses, to create this summary of the consultation material, so that you don't have to go through those hundreds or thousands of pages yourself, at least in the early stages. So you can get like this early snapshot or early picture of what's happened with the consultation. And then this is also going to include what I call in English right now is source tracking. So in the synthesis, in the summary, you will be able to find then links or connections to to the comment, the specific page in the specific comment that led to the synthesis having this sentence or this paragraph in it, for instance. So this way, it's like an indexing of all the comments you got from the public consultation, and then you can use your human brain in conjunction with the AI to figure out which are the bits that are relevant and which are the bits that aren't relevant. So ideally, this will expedite this process quite a bit. Second and third use cases, this is what I call establishing legal context and also what I call regulatory metadata. When we're talking about the legal context, let's say the European Union is working on passing a new act that is very wide-ranging and has broad implications for multiple different sectors in public life. And then what you have to do, at least in Finland, probably in other member states as well, you have to figure out what are the connections of this new act, this new proposal, to other pending proposals, some national legislation that we already have on the books, some proposed national legislation that we might be thinking on right now, other union legislation, other union proposals, and so on. But this is a huge amount of text that you're supposed to go through. And this is also something that requires a lot of, for like a human, this requires a lot of context understanding, like having that intuition, like the lawyer's intuition that, hey, this sounds like something that probably is related to this something else. And then following up and researching that hunch and figuring out if the hunch was correct. But this, as a process, as like a human cognitive process, can be pretty chaotic, and it's prone to error, which is like completely understandable. So the idea is that using this semantic Finlex training set that I'm going to come back to in a minute, we can use that we can use that and the new proposal and feed that into an AI model, and then the AI model will be able to create a list, a short list of, well, these are the other regulations that you might be interested in. Now when I put it like that, it sounds like the Amazon recommendation algorithm, but ideally it'll work better than the Amazon recommendation algorithm. But that's one that will ideally save a lot of time, especially in the early stages of an initiative, that's when you're most pressed for time. Because in the Finnish system, let's say when you get a new EU proposal, you're supposed to be able to provide a pretty detailed position paper to the parliament within a couple of weeks, which is not a lot of time for something like, let's say, the Artificial Intelligence Act. And then the third use case, which I've combined on this slide, this is very technical. When we are writing a new bill in Finland, when we have to create like new legislation, it can be completely new legislation, or it can be legislation that changes existing legislation. Then when you are writing that new legislation to change existing legislation, you need to have a header section that details like this. This is the bit of that law that has to be changed as follows. And this can be very complicated, as you will see in just a second, and this can have also severe consequences if you make a mistake, because suddenly you've done a change that you didn't mean to, or you failed to make a change that you were supposed to make. So this is like an example of the header section. This isn't the most complicated example that I could find, but it's not also the most simple example that I could find. Sometimes it's very straightforward, but in this case it isn't. In this header section, what's really happening, what's like the actual thing is that in the law, the Act on the Openness of Government Activities, there's a specific concept or a specific definition, a word that is being used. And as part of a bigger administrative reform, that word has to be changed to something else. But instead of doing Control F, find and replace, what we have to do is we have to write this complicated header section that basically describes that in this section, in this paragraph, we are changing this word to another word. And then you have to do it for the entire act, which can be, as you can see, it can be a lot of work. And what's like the nightmare of most legislative drafters like myself is that we make a small mistake here somewhere, and then we have to go through the whole process again and do an corrigendum and whatever so that we can get it sorted out later. So ideally, this is like a good use case for automation, because like the actual thing, like if you tear it down into like a very simple logical operation, it's not super complicated. But as a human being, having to keep track of all these little things and trying to figure out and keep like the consistency and the coherence of what you're doing and not lose track of what you're doing and where, that can be very taxing for you. But in this case, if and when we'll be able to do this automatically, or at least provide a template or a draft automatically, then instead of having to create it from whole cloth, you're just like reviewing an existing work, which is, at least personally, I would find it a lot more relaxing than having to create this from scratch. Like I mentioned, we're using this data set called Semantic Finlex for these, most of these experiments or pilots. It's the corpus of Finnish legislation up to a given date, and it contains all that legislation as open data in a machine-readable format. It also includes court decisions. And the idea is that this so far has been what you'd call a research project. So the Ministry of Justice and the University of, I want to say it's Aalto, but Helsinki will be mad if I'm incorrect, so I'll just say I'm not sure. But this was done as a cooperative research project, which is of course not like a long-lasting solution. So for the future, this electronic collection of legislation is going to be renewed by itself so that it's going to be natively available as open data in a machine-readable format and through an API, which is going to make these applications much easier to pilot and then go to production with as well. Okay, finally, use case number 4, not very new maybe, but in our context, extremely important. Finland has 2 official languages, and Finnish and Swedish, of course. And every major proposal, bill, memorandum, etc., it has to be available in both Finnish and Swedish. And no one has done the numbers on this, but you can imagine it's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort to translate everything from Finnish to Swedish, Finnish being the majority language. Most of the work done in government happens in Finnish, and then when you have that ready work, that ready output, then it has to be translated into Swedish. Then you have the public consultation, you have to change it, then you have to make all the changes to the Swedish translation as well. This is also related to the fact that part of Finland is the Åland Islands, which have their autonomous status, and their official language is Swedish, and of course our laws, many of our laws apply as is on Åland Islands as well, so they have to be in Swedish as well. So we've of course looked into machine translation. With machine translation, of course, the issue is, one is the proneness for errors or the potential for errors, and the other is, like I mentioned earlier, we have to be careful about the inputs, because if a legislative proposal is in an early draft stage, then the input is something that we don't really want to be available broadly to everyone, everywhere. It's something that is being worked on in government so far, and then it's going to be published when it's in a more ready stage. But we have had already in production use for several years a government machine translation service, which has been trained using specifically legal datasets and legal vocabularies, which is available to most or not if all central government civil servants. It also has English, because as we know, as I'm speaking in English right now, English is also an important language. But the idea is that in the long run, this will be, once the quality is better and we have a better handle on the input and output governance issues, we would be able to use machine translation for doing these official translations. But of course, another important element is that we also, when we are preparing new reforms or new legislation, we always have to look at what other countries are doing. For instance, I've been drafting a bilateral agreement in the past few years, and one critical element in fitting together the 2 legal systems in a bilateral agreement between 2 countries is figuring out, well, how are they legislating this question in the other country that we're making the agreement with, in their own words. So this is also machine translation here is going to be super useful, because it's not really realistic that every civil servant or that most civil servants will know all official EU languages, for instance. But using machine translation, we'll be able to have access to a much wider scope of different kinds of legal acts, so we can do these comparisons, like how are they doing this in Sweden, how are they doing this in Denmark, and so on. Yeah, so that's my section. Thank you very much. How much?
Thank you.
Do we still have time?
Go on.
Yeah, Anna-Mari has a couple of words left.
Go on, please.
Okay, so I'll try to be quick, given that we have already taken so much time. So the examples that Antti just went through, they are kind of examples of the way how in practice in public sector administration we are kind of forced to use these technologies. So we start with the legal considerations and then we move on and continue from there. However, from the kind of layers of interoperability point of view, they are examples of the so-called top-down approaches, which is one of the kind of schools or sets of approaches to the increasing interoperability actions. The other way, or perhaps the other alternative, is to start to formulate the so-called bottom-up approaches, which are, for example, recommended by this wonderful publication by EU, where it's kind of recommended to should promote the use of uniform and standardized ontologies and taxonomies to create a common language, and so on and so on and so on. And this is an example of the so-called bottom-up approach. The problem with top-down approaches is roughly that they are very stiff. We are really not very creative when we are using the already existing taxonomies, whether or not they come from legal considerations or wherever. On the other hand, the problem with the bottom-up approaches is that they are a kind of chicken-egg approaches, because quite often the data is very messy, noisy and fragmented, and you don't get anything very useful out of it. And of course, in the context of public sector administration, one of the problems with the bottom-up approaches is the potential of LLMs to hallucinate on generative AI in general. And I guess that we are coming back to the problem of hallucination several times today. So if you can't steer and somehow mitigate the risk of hallucination, then of course it will raise a lot of problem to the public sector usage, at least in countries like Finland. But hey, now it's time to move on, so thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Antti. Thank you, Anna-Mari. Impressive. A lot of things going on in Finland, and I'm happy Finland has the same problem as Luxembourg and Belgium, published in multiple languages. So we've seen some very interesting use cases, like the summarization of the consultations. I think this applies to all countries, member states, machine translation, the legal context. And by the way, there I would like to add, as I come from the Publication Office of the European Union has actually the biggest probably knowledge graph in the world on legislation, with all the relations between the European legislation and national implementation. So maybe you might take a little look onto that, or discuss at the coffee of how can you make profit at the context, legal context in Finland. Now the next speaker, we're moving into another area, and the next speaker is coming all the way from Madrid in Spain, where the last SEMIC conference was, and very, very dynamically. So I would like to welcome Alberto Abela. He has an impressive CV. I need to really look at the name of the PhD and the master. He has a PhD in Business Open Data and Telecommunications Engineer, and the master in Total Quality Management, Business Administration and Business Organization. But above all, Alberto is a data modeling expert and a technology evangelist for Fireware, and he's a well-acclaimed researcher on open data. I think you wrote the last 7 years status of open data in Spain.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
The floor is yours, and I would eventually like to ask all speakers to stay eventually on the left side and pay attention to the slides so that the audience see them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me go to the last slide, because these are the contacts, and this is what I'm going to talk to. But first question is, are we good at interoperability? Are we doing a good job? What do you think? So let me bring some data from. So what you see in the graph is a sample of the Spanish open data portals. I've sampled, and you see the red part is those data which are published and are meant for being reused, therefore supposedly has to be interoperable, but has no data, no model, no semantic model at all. So 70%. Okay, additionally, this is, let's say, oh, this is just from the open data. But I don't have the slides, but there is another source, which is the data space for mobility. In the data space for mobility, 50% of the data to be shared, meant to be shared, 50% has no semantic model at all. Therefore, if we think that we are doing a good job, maybe we have to reconsider this thing. The other thing is that I've been participating since 2018 in a working group for making kind of a common standard for this open data. Unfortunately, in 6 years, we only got 80 data sets standardized. 80, possibly in this 71,000, and it's from past year, I guess that now is 80,000, possibly there will be 3,000, 4,000 types of data. And we have standardized 80. 80 compared with 3,000. We are doomed. And why are we doomed? Why do we have a problem? Because we are based on old paradigm, which is the consensus. The consensus is very good. It's very good. There is no regret on that. But unfortunately, the market has another speed. Just let me comment. How many months has passed since ChatGPT is in the market? How many months? 20. 20 months. Months. Okay. I don't know how many of you are familiar with ISO. I don't want to blame ISO, but how long does it take to create a standard in ISO? There is 3 paths, 18 months, 24 months, and 36 months for creating standards. Compared with 20 months, in 20 months, AI has, let's say, skyrocketed. Now the world is changing, and we cannot use the same procedures, which are measured in months, for a different world. Does it mean that it's wrong? It is not wrong, but you need something else. And this is what I'm going to do. And what's the role on AI here? The point is that AI will help us to reach that goal, because without AI, possibly we won't be able. But there is something else that we have to do, and this is what I want to discuss. So what you see in the lower level is the classical standardization, done by consensus, done in standardization bodies like ISO, and producing standards on interoperable specifications which are closed. Why I'm saying that they are closed? Because you have to pay for it. You cannot share it freely. Okay? I'm not complaining about it. This is what it is. But there are another alternative. Okay? And this alternative has to be complementing the classical standardization. And you see, the classical standardization, we are talking about tens of months, 24 months, 30 months, okay, so on. Agile standardization has to be done in the matter of weeks. Weeks, not just months, weeks. And how can you do that? Without consensus. Unfortunately, consensus is a luxury that we cannot afford. Remember, I'm not saying that classical standardization has to be removed, not at all, but has to be complemented. And agile standardization is based on 2 main sources. Pioneers, so people that has started to do something on a new data, and they are willing to share with others. You can take this pioneer example, document it, and release with an open license, and let others to extend very easily this initial work. And therefore, with this, you can do things in a matter of weeks. Or our goal at the Smart Data Models Initiative is to do it in a week. So since you have created something, you have an example, you demonstrate that it's working, and you submit your information, the idea is that in 1 week, you have it. And to be honest, we have it in fact. Let me check, because sometimes I have some remarkable information that I want to share with you. I don't want to miss something. here. Oh, yeah. And you know what's the problem? The problem is us, is humans. Humans are expensive and slow for the real market. I'm not against humans. I'm a human, if you noticed. But we have to be paid. And we don't have the money, and we don't have the time for doing it. So we have to remove it as much as possible. In fact, in our initiative for Agile standardization, what we are doing is make automatic everything that we can, everything. Currently, only there is a one manual decision. Once it is approved, we launch a set of scripts, and we create a specification in 8 languages. We translate into different formats. We create exports in other technical formats. We also populate a database to be searchable for everybody, and we include that information into a Python package. Everything is done automatically in approximately 6 to 8 minutes. And are you very clever? No, we are not. We are just trusting on technology. And AI is there for helping us. And these are the lessons that we have learned regarding Agile standardization. And these lessons are not because we are very clever. No, no, these are made based on our errors. We made lots of errors. There is one error. I have the impression that interoperability won't be achieved ever. Won't. We will not reach everything. But possibly, we can do it much better than we are doing right now. So first point, we discovered if we don't do it in a very short time, like in a week, don't do it. Second lesson, do not reinvent the wheel. You cannot imagine how many people has contacted us and saying, oh, I have this ontology. This ontology is perfect. And the point is that ontologies are perfect. That's right. Unfortunately, the world is not perfect. There are many things, there are many exceptions. In fact, this is one of our first mistakes. Oh, one term, only one meaning for everything. And then discover, we have some examples, that the vehicle is something in railways, but is something different in smart cities. And unfortunately, is the very same name, vehicle. And are you going to tell the people in the smart cities, no, you can no longer call it this vehicle. You have to change the name. No way. This is not going to happen, okay? Unfortunately, we have the URIs for making unique, but so basically my lesson learned is that world is imperfect, and we have to adapt it, not just try to make the world, oh, you have to change to match the ontology. The other point, normalize real cases. Real cases means that we only accept models with real examples working, not just, this is my design, working. If you don't have a real use case, go to your use case, do it, and come back. Another point is not lessons, because it was designed since the beginning. Firewall Foundation is a non-profit association. Everything that we do is open license. Therefore, open meaning you can use for free, you can customize to your needs, and you can share the modifications. Next one is don't be overly specific. Let me put an example. Sometimes people approach to us, oh, I have a data model for a farm. This farm has 3 silos. Okay, and we make that stupid question. What if a farm has 4 silos? We put an array of silos, and you can have any silos that you want. But remember, if you generalize, it has to match the use case that you have. Another thing, and this is not going to be very popular, is that people contributing is not presenting us a well-structured hierarchy of data objects and so on. This is flat. There are data models which are self-contained. You don't have to jump to a schema.org in order to know what's the real meaning of that term. Has to be in there. So they are not willing to jump to 3 links that possibly these links are broken or whatever. I know that this is not very popular, but it works. And the last point is that sustainability has to be key. If you are a project that everybody knows, oh, in 2 years you won't be here because the money will be running out of money, okay. So, and now, what is AI here? AI is here for making this possible. Less resources, less humans. I'm not against humans, let me remark it. But with AI, we can save lots of time, lots of resources. In what points? Do not reinvent the wheel. Whenever somebody is approaching us, we have to look if there is such a standard around there. Open a standard, remember, ISO standards in most of the cases are not open. We have to filter lots of errors. With AI, we can do it, simplify the testing, the error detection, and also the support to users or contributors. I guess that AI will help us also into the generalization of use cases. And finally, it will help us to save time and money. And let me go to the last one. Here. This is our plans. Unfortunately, I would like to say, oh, we have everything working. And the answer, the short answer is that not yet. And we have tested, and unfortunately, the results are not very good for us. Not yet. So that's why we are working. So first thing that we want to do, support to the users, support to the contributors, make their life easy. By the way, if we are running something about the standardization, interoperability, has to be done for domain experts. Most of us, possibly, we are data modeling experts. But the people out there has to be, how many of you are experts on marine transport? Possibly none of us. But they are the ones that have to make the data models for marine transport, not us. So we don't have to say, oh, what you need is an ontology. You don't know what a marine transport needs. So first thing, support to the users. Using LLMs for adopters, for contributors, or for detecting adopters. One of our, let's say, drawbacks in the initiative is that as long as it's open data, we don't know how many people are using them. So we have around 300 use cases, but we estimate that could be more than 10 times this figure. Another thing that we are doing for testing the code, creating code for testing what is contributed. Currently, what we got, the code that we got for AI, is not very good. It's not good enough. So we need to debug quite. It is good that it's saving some time, but currently, okay, we have to keep on working. And another point that we are exploring is the creation of synthetic data. Because many people is telling us, oh, I have a data model, I need just a payload with 100 examples of this. We have this service, but this service is providing, let's say, stupid data. You have a field which is they created and they modified. I'm capable of providing you something which is a date, but maybe the creation date is later than the modifying date. So we need to put some kind of logic on that and to be capable of creating meaningful examples. And the last thing is that we should be able, with AI, to look for open standardization that we can map into the Smart Data Models initiative. Okay? Currently, we are, let's say, reactive. We have more work than we can deal with, but possibly with AI, we could be much more agile. And finally, which is quite meaningful, detect potential candidates of semanticization. So remember, around 50%, that's my estimation, of the data around there has no semantics. We have tomorrow something to talk about data spaces. My concern is that more than 50%, as demonstrated into the mobility data space, has no semantics at all. So we are living in a world which is very specific, but out there, most of the information has no semantic description, and therefore, we will be doomed. So let me recap just with one sentence. AI is here for making interoperability possible to the extent that we will be able to do it. Because my take is that we won't be able to do it for everything or for the 70% of the market. Maybe 30% is a nice figure. And it will be save tons of money for our economy. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alberto. I hope we still will be saved, not doomed, but I'm positive and optimist as a character. Thank you for taking us from the lack of standardization. We also see it in the publication office with the open data portal, and we invest a lot of time to the use of AI, and probably standardizing in 1 week is the dream of every industry. If we ever manage that, we colonize Mars in 1 year. Now, moving forward, we will see a presentation about how to empower interoperability with AI solutions in practice. And I welcome here Emilien Caudron. He's with the PwC Belgium in AI and semantics as a consultant, and he joined PwC from the Louvain School of Law, where he got the School of Management. Excuse me, School of Management, where you get your degree in business engineering. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes. I'm going to present you some of the use cases that, as part of SEMIC, we've explored in the past months, trying to understand how we can support interoperability with different AI solutions. Overall, we have conducted 4 main activities around AI for interoperability. We've started with some knowledge extraction, so trying to understand how we can use AI to extract the core semantic information from a large set of pledges and really derive insights from it. Next to that, we've also conducted a bit of fundamental research on LLMs, looking at how we can improve the performance of those models with domain adaptation. A third use case was really practical, trying to help in the data modeling process. We've built a chatbot, so trying to see how we can use, in that case, really Gen AI for supporting the work of data modeler. And finally, a last use case that we've started to explore relates to semantic tagging, so trying to automate the process of tagging data sets. Let's start with the knowledge extraction. So this was really the first use case that we explored on AI for interoperability. And it started from a proof of concept conducted in collaboration with DG Grow around the transition pathway for tourism. For that action, DG Grow is collecting a lot of commitments from their stakeholders about what they plan to implement to achieve the digital transition, the sustainable transition, and other actions that are defined in that transition pathway for tourism. And since it represents a quite important amount of text, they wanted to see if we could use AI to get relevant insight, to understand what are the key topics covered by those pledges. Are stakeholders mostly planning to implement action related to sustainability, to data, and so on. And also trying to see how we can identify when are those actions going to be implemented. And how did we manage to do it? For the topic extraction, we relied on a neural language model, Word2Vec, which allowed to vectorize text. So you create vectors that capture the main semantic and syntactic information. And once you have that, you can then apply classical machine learning tools such as clustering to create group of pledges that have similar meanings. And since they have similar meanings, it means that they share a common topic. And that allowed us to identify in this first prototype that we had 6 different topics covered by the different texts of the stakeholders. And using some visuals like word clouds, it was possible then to really understand what were those topics. One example here was that a key issue that stakeholders wanted to address was really related to digital, the implementation of platforms, online platform, and so on. In the continuity of this work we performed with DG Grow, we wanted to see how we could improve the quality of a large language model through domain adaptation. Domain adaptation is quite intuitive. The idea behind domain adaptation is that if you want a large language model to be good in a domain-specific task, you better provide him with domain-specific data. For example, if you want your model to answer legal question, just continue the training or retrain it on legal documents. So we wanted to see if this was also true for EU policy documents and legislations. We took the use case from the knowledge extraction, so extracting the topics from the large set of text from DG Grow. And so we built a corpus on that domain on the transition pathway for tourism with policy documents around that. And with this small corpus, we continued the training of 2 large language models, Roberta and BERT. And so continuing the training allowed us to keep the initial knowledge of the LLMs, but adding an extra layer of knowledge to it, which also allowed to keep the costs relatively low in that case. And then we clustered the different texts again and compared the results with Word2Vec, classic LLM, and the domain-adapted one. And what we found out was quite interesting. First, we showed that domain adaptation has a positive impact. We see that the performance of both models are improved thanks to the domain adaptation. Still, we also found out that those more complex model, LLMs, were less useful than Word2Vec. It was harder to understand what is the content of the cluster with the LLMs than with Word2Vec. So besides showing that domain adaptation is useful, it also allowed us to see that you can have some kind of trade-off between the use of sophisticated models and interpretability, usability of the results. Next to that whole stream of activities around knowledge extraction, we also explored how we could support the data modeling work by creating a prototype of data modeling chatbot. Here the use case, the intuition was that as a data modeler, as part of SEMIC, and as Alberto mentioned, an important part of the work is not reinventing the wheel. It's reusing existing concepts when you are creating your own data model. So we wanted to have a chatbot that would be able to have access to information on existing model, existing class, relationships, properties, and so on. And so you could ask questions about, for example, taking CPS-VAP, you want to know what is a class for a requirement that a requirement should fulfill. It should suggest that it's a rule and give you the different references to that class in CPS-VAP. So that was the use case we wanted to explore. Now, how did we manage to do it? We relied on retrieval augmented generation, which is an approach that has a pre-trained LLM. So for our case, it was Azure OpenAI GPT-4. And next to it, you have a knowledge base. And in this knowledge base, you have all those existing concepts, the specification pages, and so on that you want the LLM to have access to. And finally, the last element that you need is a search engine that will go through the knowledge base and identify the documents that are the most relevant based on the query of the user. And once it has identified that, it provides it to the LLM that can then provide a contextualized answer to the user. So the knowledge base in our case, I mentioned it, most of the documents were specification page around one specific use case, which was CPS-VAP. So we had the specification page plus regulations indexed in the knowledge base. And finally, we wanted also to have access to a wide variety of data models. And so that's why we indexed 2 RDF files, linked open vocabulary and schema.org. And with that, we had a first version, which allowed us to accomplish what we wanted. So simply, for example, for corpus and suggested relation, we see that the chatbot is able to find the relevant relation to put in that sentence. And you can also have access to the reference, so you can see from which specification it's taking it from, what is the URI of the the relation in that case. But next to, after this initial version, we also wanted to have additional features to really integrate the tool into the full data modeling process. And so one first thing that we did was to allow for uploading your data model in an XML format. So for example, here with core vocabularies, you can upload it. And first thing you can do is just explore your data model. In that case, yeah, explore the classes that you have in your model. And you see that the chatbot is able to identify those inside the XMI and display it. You can then decide to search for information about a specific class, for example, person, and the chatbot will return you the definition, the properties, the attributes of this specific class to allow you really to understand what's inside your current model. But then the most important use case is really about inspiration. You want the chatbot to help you if you want to modify your model to create a new one. So in this first case, you just ask about potential attributes, and the chatbot returns some example, but for the moment, without looking into the knowledge base we have. Same here for relationship. It's, in that case, more about brainstorming, trying to identify potential ideas that you may want to explore. And once you have identified something that you find relevant to add, for example, you have discussed with the chatbot and you think that adding a medical history class to a person could be relevant. So now you want to know if something similar exists in other data models. So you ask the question to the chatbot. And then you can see in a minute. Yeah. You can see that it has found 3 potential classes that could play the role of this medical history class in your model. And so you can see that you have the definition, some subclass relation that already exists, and still the reference to the different documents. Once you are happy with the class set that you want to add, you have discussed, you have identified what you wanted, you can also then export. You can add the class to your model, asking the chatbot to add it, and then visualize what it looks like, and finally export it to then play with the tool you are used to when creating data models. That was for the chatbot. Now the last use case we've explored as part of SEMIC is semantic tagging. It's really an early result, but we wanted to see how we can facilitate the research and retrieval of data sets on the European Open Data Portal. And to do that, we wanted to use AI to suggest Eurovoc tags. High level, how did we do that? We use semantic search to look for Eurovoc tags that are the most similar to a dataset description and title. For this first exploration, we only used tags that had a description, so really a small subset, and pushed it to Azure AI Search Index. And we had some initial results that are quite encouraging. We can see for this data set on roaming that in the suggested tags, we have roaming inside it. The other one would require some deeper analysis to see if they are really relevant. Same for this data set on forest carbon potential. You see that you have a lot of tags that are relevant: carbon neutrality, carbon capture, and storage. But as I mentioned, this is still early results, and we want to go deeper into it to see if we can fine-tune it, test if it's relevant and performant. And that was it for the different activities of SEMIC on AI for interoperability. Thank you.
Thank you, Emilia. I keep in mind that I can talk now to your chatbot if I want to create the next model. That's an automation which definitely makes winning time and less resources involved in order to achieve the objective. Now, the last presentation of the first part is dear friend and colleague from the publication office, Willem van Gemert, Deputy head of unit in the data and formats standardization in the Publication Office of the European Union, and one of the most engaged people I know about formats and data references.
Thank you very much, Razvan, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really happy to be back at SEMIC because I wasn't here for a couple of years, but it's always inspiring already now, the presentations this morning. I think we have a lot of things to discuss about. So I would like to speak about to you about reference data. That's really my, I would say my passion, but also my what we are really working hard on, and in particular on EU reference data. So just 2 words about the Publications Office. So you may know us. We are the publisher of official EU data. You are familiar probably with sites such as Eurlex for legal data, TED for public procurement data, the Open Data Portal, Data Europa EU. But I don't know if you are aware that all this data is available through open access in an open data repository of the Publications Office, and that the metadata are available in RDF semantic format. So as Publications Office, we are in contact with many different author institutions, but also with contractors that produce data. And so very early on we saw the importance of standardization for interoperability. And so what we started developing was standard data models, and as part of that also reference data such as code lists, Thesauri. You heard already earlier the mention of Eurovoc, the general multilingual thesaurus with around 8,000 concepts. And so we have the EU Vocabularies website where you can find many of these interoperability assets in, for instance, SCOS format. So some examples of reference data, from simple code lists to more complex forms of like taxonomies, thesauri, or even ontologies. And so the question I ask myself is, do we still now in this era of AI, do we still need reference data? And so, okay, I think we heard already about hallucinations, trustworthiness of data as a provider of official EU information, but also as an organization that is looking to become a data-driven organization. We have the data that we have needs to be trustworthy, both the data that we use, but also the data that we provide. And reference data is also a way to actually provide a context to a business reality. So for instance, if you could say, okay, you need a list of countries, why don't you take the ISO code? Well, in the institutions, we have particularity that some member states, for instance, have not recognized officially Kosovo. So we have, in the context of the EU institutions, we have another political reality than an ISO code, ISO list provides us. So we need to have reference data that allows us to provide this business context. And then I think it goes without saying that high quality data is needed also to train AI solutions, also to validate and test algorithms. And there's also a relationship between structured data and high quality reference data for the performance and reliability of AI systems. So we are, of course, so we are very interested in the developments around AI. And so what we found interesting looking at the outlook that Gartner had published around the generative AI, we were fascinated to see that already in 2024 there is this, they foresee the integration of knowledge graphs in with generative AI. So I will not go into detail here because we have afterwards the presentation of Jeremy, who will speak exactly about this topic, but we think that there is a real, very interesting potential of marrying these two technologies. And so you could look at it from several sides. So you could say I use knowledge graphs to enhance LLMs, or use LLMs to enhance knowledge graphs. And what we then can expect in the future is to have these synergies between the two. So I will speak more about the second case, about the use of LLMs to enhance knowledge graphs and, for instance, reference data in the form of knowledge graphs. So how can we use this? For instance, one thing is to use AI to identify inconsistencies, errors in your data. So this is a way to improve the quality. What we saw already this morning, the automated translation to come to cross-border interoperability, to have additional language version of translations of the definitions. And so at the publications office, we systematically publish everything in the 24 official EU languages. So, so far in our reference data, we also try to make them available in all EU languages. And so automated translation is really an important tool there. Also to align, for instance, between different existing reference data assets. An aspect that we are particularly interested in is this automated vocabulary expansion. We have, I mentioned Eurovoc, 8,000 concepts. This has been developed over the years. We would be very interested to see, by looking at a particular corpus, if the coverage of Eurovoc in that domain is still up to date, or if there are concepts that are missing that we should add to this vocabulary. So this is a way that we can do this through automated vocabulary expansion. And then we can also have semantic analysis to, for instance, enrich relationships between concepts in vocabularies and between vocabularies. And you can also use this to, for instance, create custom vocabularies for a particular area of activity or specific domain. So you can look at, again, a corpus, look what kind of concepts are used there, and then create a custom vocabulary, a specific custom vocabulary. Second, or to continue, and I think something which I'm really very much looking forward to it, and I think it's this automatic semantic tagging. I think this will be a real game changer for the use of reference data. So if you take an example, we mentioned Eurovoc a couple of times. Who can assign keywords from a vocabulary that has 8,000 concepts? Only professional catalogers can do this. And we have, in the publications office, we have one contractor for legal cataloging and a team of catalogers that do exactly this. They index each general publication, so each publication with EU information, which is of non-legislative nature. They assign these keywords. But if you ask an average user, including myself, to, if I write a document and to assign keywords to it, there's no way I can do it. Whereas with automatic semantic tagging, if you get a suggestion, your news article, your document is about the following, I don't know, 5, 6 keywords, and you can validate it. That would really allow to apply this everywhere, and then also make the link with all the existing legislation, documents, and everything that have already been tagged with these Eurovoc concepts. We saw just the example of the use of chatbots. We saw We had a presentation from the Luxembourg Institute of Science and Technology. They have also played with this idea of having for each data set a chatbot allowing users to interact with the data set in question, to understand it, to ask how to find, to make it easier to understand and to use the data, and also to actually have the chatbot create specific queries. So even if you don't know Sparkle, you can still get the results you want. And then also use AI to enhance search functionality. And a last thing, maybe we can also imagine it using for accessibility enhancement, to have, for instance, text that are read out loud using AI. So, to finish, what I see and what I hear, and we saw it a bit when we worked together with the SEMIC team for this proof of concept for automatic semantic tagging. When we first met, we saw that there were actually already other initiatives, and people had been doing more or less the same thing, but we were not aware of that. So and that's what you mentioned earlier, Alberto, with I would say the blessing on the one hand of open data is that so many people have access and are using the data that we make available. The problem is that we don't know who are using this data. And what surprises me a bit is that people don't reach out to me. So I would expect, okay, if you're trying to set up something or to create an automatic tagging solution around Eurovoc, well, reach out to us and say, okay, we want to do this. What would be the best data set to use? What do you have maybe, I don't know, annotated data that we can use for this? And so I think that is really important. I could see there maybe a role also for the SEMIC communities. How can we bring together this different expertise, combining the business, the technical, and the data knowledge, and to be aware of what goes on, and also how we can actually learn from experiences, from things that have worked and things that have not worked, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And then a second challenge, and I think that again would be really interesting to also learn from each other, is to how to move from a proof of concept to something that can be really used in production. So for instance, many of us are using commercial solutions, such as, for instance, SharePoint. So how can you use an open source automatic semantic tagging solution and integrate it into a commercial solution like SharePoint? How can you, voila. I'm sure we are not the only one who are facing this problem, so I would be really interested in learning from the community. And again, I think this is something where I could imagine that SEMIC could play a role. And then, voila, last call is, how can we help you to explore reference data for AI? So also, what do you expect? And so I would be willing, and I'm very interested to have a discussion with you in the course of the day, in coffee breaks, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Binem. And that's a call for action. So we need a call for action. The second one is we'll start the panel. And if you allow me, I will just add shortly another example we have in the publications office, which is in production for semantic tagging. When we use such a common vocabulary, CPV, common procurement vocabulary, in order to classify the public procurements, right? Because publication office also publishes TED and the public procurement. So there we managed to improve up to 24 out of my top of my head, 24 of the total number of the public procurement procedures since 2011 by enriching them with machine learned CPVs based on the description, title of the various contract notices and the lots description. 1/4 of all the procedures are enriched with new CPVs based on the content, and that's a very tangible example of doing that in practice. So now the interactive session. Can we maybe display the Slido again? Voila. I will maybe move from here.
And later on, we'll invite you to also answer a couple of questions from Slido, so feel free to already scan the QR code and join us on Slido.
So what I would like to do now is to invite our guests, our speakers, Antti, Anne-Marie, Alberto, Willem, Emilia. Don't hesitate to take a seat. And the audience, please raise a hand. We will come with the mic to you. And also online. Voila. So we'll probably kickstart our discussion with the online. Yeah. Do you completely trust the machine translation, or there is still someone proofreading every page? I think this can be probably addressed to our Finnish colleagues who talked about machine translation. You have one mic there. I think I will actually take two.
Yeah, no, we do not completely trust the machine translation, and it's official guidance that you should not use the machine translated materials as is. So you have to do at least a sanity check before you use it for anything.
Yes, it makes absolute sense. I would like to still stay with you, and based on the 4 examples, very practical examples that you gave, maybe deep dive a little bit into the challenges you had or the mistakes you encountered or you did in the process of those use cases, because I'm sure you did a lot of mistakes and then you came back and you iterated on that.
Well, actually, there has been quite many attempts and pilot experiments already going on in Finnish public sector governance. And if I summarize briefly, some of the problems are related to the rarity of the good quality training data for LLMs. Finnish is a really difficult language, and maybe 15 years ago, when we started to save everything in a PDF format, well, it's a poison to LLM, so we have had some problems to have sufficient amount of training data in some cases. That's one. Second, people who have been doing all these experiments, they have not always had a very clear idea that what they really want to do with the LLMs. And given the kind of contemporary atmosphere in Finnish governance, it is not the best way to do these very inefficient trial and error experiments, too many. And of course we have learned that the kind of the tendency to do everything in a silo structures, it is something that we should do something about. So this comes back to the interoperability issues, that okay, it isn't the best way to kind of to speed up interoperable solutions by doing everything in the silo structure. So this is a kind of a comment on the organizational layer of interoperability. What else? The data. Well, of course, we have had also some problems with the hallucinating LLMs, because it's turned out to be a bit tricky for us to figure out that okay, how could we fine tune and train the models so that we could use them. But we are learning, and we are learning fast. But Antti, would you like to continue something about the problems or the lessons that we have learned? Yeah.
Did you have any issues in actually identifying the right data when you adapted or retrained the models?
Well, most of the experiments, they have been done by these different agencies and different domain specialists. So we haven't had the problem to kind of locate and individuate the data. The problem is that perhaps the data is not in the right in a format that we could use it in a very efficient way. But there is also this problem that we haven't perhaps found the best possible way to kind of to use the same data so that we can apply it to several domains and things like that. But on this,
I'd also add that a lot of like experimentation is kind of going data first in a way. So the thinking is that, well, we have this interesting data like semantic Finlex, then what could we do with that? So it's not necessarily like we have a problem and what's the data to solve that problem. It's more like, well, we have this data and could we do something interesting with it, because we're still not necessarily in that stage where we can actually think about like systematize things in the way that, okay, we have this problem and what are the AI tools that we could use to solve it necessarily.
Yeah, so you're pointing also on the discovery. You're actually pointing to what Alberto was raising in his presentation about the lack of standardization, but also on the ability actually to identify easily and in a meaningful and efficient way the data that you need in a big data lake. There was an interesting question I wanted to take. Now it disappeared, but I think it was for you, Willem, on if there are any EU common vocabularies for data quality monitoring.
Yeah, so
Voilà, you reference data containing data quality monitoring.
yeah, so I mean, we have a quality process in place, but so far we are not using AI solutions to look for data quality, but it's something that we are typically looking into. We have already also in the past seen that, for instance, also visualization, data visualization can help to identify anomalies actually, or things that stand out in the quality. But so typically EU reference, we have a 4I principle, but it's still a human process.
HI, human intelligence.
Yes, I was interested because I saw also the question about the XML format. That if you're using in Finlex, are you using a standard such as Akumontoso?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think we're the right people to answer this. Like, this is a pretty technical question. I mean, there is the project, the dataset has its own website, which I recall has a pretty detailed description of the formats and the models used. It's I think it's data.finlex.fi. So it's probably better than me trying to give a very bad explanation. It's better to go to the source and look at the documentation.
Yeah, it also answers the question on top of the...
Maybe, Razan, we have also a question here in the audience.
Yes, please. Yeah, I wanted exactly to do that.
Thank you. So I have a question for Mr. Abela. Abela, is it? In fact, it was very interesting to see your approach to agile standardization, but I wonder how you deal with for me or for the people. So what is the main virtue of standards? Are there stability over time to avoid disruption in their system? So the question is, how do you deal with this need for stability in this very interesting process?
That's a very interesting question. Basically, we always keep backward compatibility. So the models can grow, but you cannot make a disruptive change. So we have around more than 1,000 data models. It has happened twice, and one was because of our fault. So we made a mistake, we discovered and we fixed it. And the other was because there was a disruption on the open standard. So the open standard decided to make a backward incompatible version, we have to follow. Otherwise, our policy is, okay, you can extend the model. Okay, can be attributes that they are not longer used, but they are kept there, and never make a backward incompatible version as much as possible. Let me remind something. At the very beginning, we were thinking, no, we won't do this ever. Then we discovered that reality is more complex than we expected. And then we have to do twice. Can I promise that it won't happen again? The answer is no. We do our best to prevent it, but we cannot commit.
And I think, Alberto, what you just stated is for the agile standardization process that you follow, correct? And what about the AI that you introduced, that you described? Will that produce more backwards compatibility issues, do you think?
We have to prevent that for any available means. So AI has to be supportive, not to create more problems that we already have. Hopefully.
Is there any other question in the audience? There's one here. Florian.
I'm coming.
It's actually connected to the first one on the top, but to all of you, a sense of if we have now AI coming into the game and have tools that suggests new terms, so like for Eurovoc and so on, how do you see that if we were maybe unable yet to empower and to connect all experts in all the different member states to give new suggestions to reference data, how this comes into collaboration with AI suggestions and these people, so how do you see that working? Is this a challenge? Is this, do we need more processes around it or so? I don't know.
Thanks. Okay, so I mean, Eurovoc is an initiative where there is a governance in place. It's governed by the different EU institutions, and so to add a new concept, everybody can actually suggest new concepts. If you go to the EU Vocabulary's website and to Eurovoc, there is a contribute button where you can suggest new concepts. So this exists already, and then there is somebody in our team who will look into it, see if there are typically documents related to it, because there is this still bottom-up also approach to say it needs to correspond to a real need. But we are definitely looking into what I mentioned earlier, this looking at a corpus for a particular domain, seeing if there are concepts that are missing and that we should add. Always knowing that Eurovoc is a generic thesaurus of around 8,000 concepts. You cannot suddenly, if you would have, I don't know, in the medical field where maybe there are, let's say, maybe 50 concepts today in Eurovoc or 100, you cannot suddenly put around a few thousand medical concepts in there, because it would completely bring the thesaurus out of balance. What you can do is make alignments with more specialized vocabularies. And so I think that is really where I see a lot of potential to enrich the vocabularies with and to bring it up to date with using AI to identify such concepts, but always with human validation, and then also with aligning with other more specialized vocabularies. But please, we are very much looking forward to your suggestions and needs, and so it's not carved in stone. There is, it's all these reference data assets are only as valid as they are kept up to date, and so please, if you have any suggestions or needs, reach out to us.
There's a question there.
Yeah. And I think William, it connects also to the first question about can people contribute to Eurovoc?
He answered the question. That's actually a possibility to do it directly on the site and suggest terms.
Good morning. Very interesting topic about Eurovoc. So if I do understand well, it's not a property of DCAT. So we are speaking about the European Data Portal. So there's a Gen AI, which has done automatic semantic tagging of all the 2 million of metadata records you've got, and we've got in your catalog a new property, DCAT, theme Eurovoc. As a user, I don't need this filter, because actually I will say to the search engine or the Gen AI, I'm looking for this concept. I don't care if it's in Eurovoc or not. I'm just would like to bypass what you have been doing, say, hey, I'm looking for this concept. I don't care if it's in Eurovoc or whatever. And then I will have the answer based on all the 2 million of metadata records I've got there. So I don't need this Gen AI of tagging, but I need this knowledge explorer.
I'm not sure I can answer that, but maybe we can discuss in the break.
I think
I mean,
I think you will need if I can complete, because I'm more on the UX side than Willem. If I can complete that, you need both. You will need both. First of all, the generation AI on understanding and pulling out the information, yes, from a user perspective. But here today we talk a lot about interoperability. Let's not forget connecting the applications and connecting the systems. And there is a lot of legacy, not to even talk about the next steps in the plan. So systems which are connected today, they need to function in the next period. Then the next generation of systems will be definitely more intelligent, but they also need to be processing information in an efficient way. So there, standards and common vocabulary, I think there is a key element of just contracting the systems into an interoperable world of systems. Now, of course, human collaboration relies much more on the semantic and multiple understanding of somebody. Say, we don't need filtering between ourselves. But I do believe from what I see in practice every day, we are a long way forward where machines, they need still to talk through APIs, through different filtering, and common vocabularies are key there.
And there's maybe also the other aspect that it is not, if you assign a keyword to a text, it does not necessarily need to be in the text itself. So it's not that you will find the literal word. It's a keyword that characterizes the content of text. So maybe you can have a text about Brexit, or Brexit is mentioned explicitly, but this is not the keyword that you would use to assign at least a keyword in Eurovoc, but it would be more generic keyword about like exiting the EU, and that would then be linked to specific cases like Brexit, Nexit, or whatever. So this is, yeah, it's maybe, well, I think you may not necessarily find it provides also a context and a more generic, keyword.
Now there is on top a question for Emilien. Would you publish the code of your chatbot? It looks to be successful.
Yeah, thank you. For the demo slide, I think the session is recorded, so if you want to see it again another time, it's possible. For the code itself, I don't know at the moment. It's still we are still in a pilot phase, so we are still testing the tool, trying to see how reliable it can be. Yeah, several times we mentioned hallucination and so on, so we need to carefully test it. Now, yeah, we need to see as part of the SEMIC action if it's planned to publish it and so on.
But maybe here we can simply add that if people are interested, they can simply contact the SEMIC team.
Sure.
It's available through JoinUp and on case by case, because of course, as Emilien mentioned, it's a pilot phase. So if 1,000 people try to test the tool at the same time, it will crash. So it's better to to simply see a case by case, and we can see how to accommodate this.
But this is a happy problem.
Yeah, it is a happy problem. So please all contact us, and from there we'll see how to answer best.
Do you have a question there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had a question for our Finnish speakers. It was about use case 1, the summarization of public consultation replies. And my question is, in fact, I was a bit surprised that you go directly to summarization. I wondered whether applying first a clustering by topic. So I think when I think of a consultation, I think of also of sometimes very diverse ways of opinions about the consultation, and so I thought it could be so whether you did not come into problems by trying to summarize all of them as one thing, and whether it would make sense to first cluster them before summarizing the clustered replies.
Okay, actually there have been quite at least 2 or 3 pilot experiments also on this summary stuff or public consultation stuff. Some of them turn out to be problematic, and because the people who were kind of doing the experiment, it was really early stage of this LLM hype, so to speak, and it turned out to be really problematic to use the LLMs in a way that they thought. But nowadays, I guess that there have been some progress towards to the direction of developing a pipeline, a method for using these technologies in a trustworthy way, so that we would be able to kind of control that, okay, how the system is going. But as far as I know, these are also in a pilot phase, and we are not using them as a part of the legal procedure.
Yeah, not only are we are not like actually like it's not in production in the sense that we would like use them. We're still like trying to see if it's something that is actually going to save time in the process. I'd also add that there's like a kind of goal-oriented sense in that the summary is what we need as a result for the legal proposal, whereas having this understanding of what the consultation result was, and like having this understanding or like dividing into thematic categories and so on. I mean, this depends on the person doing the work, but like when I've been doing this kind of work, that thematic approach is how I like systematize it in my head and start working through it. But that's not really like that whole process is not something that ends up in the final proposal in our system. So it's like the tool is for the output that we need to like check the checklist, but actually like the full comprehension and understanding, I think, is still going to require humans actually going through the texts and reading them.
I would like to go a little bit back to Alberto, and you talked about agile standardization, but my question is how is impacting the standardization organizations themselves? And ultimately my take is all about people, always, before even starting these presentations, and you just push the nail.
I like very much the question. Unfortunately, my clear answer is that we're impacting not much, because let's say we are too agile for them. So we have been, because everything that we do is open. And sometimes we are extending already existing standard, like DCAT-AP, an example. And we have contribution from people, I need DCAT-AP to be extended for that and that. And they provide examples using and so on. And we provide this back to the standardization bodies. It's too much for them. It's too much. You contribute, let's say, I don't think that they are really capable of ingesting this kind of things. So they need their consensus process. And when you say, I don't have a consensus, I have this example, it's demonstrated that it's solving an actual problem, I guess that you should have, you have to take it into consideration. They accept it, we have done twice, but we didn't get this into the new version of the standard. We will keep doing it. And remember, every data model that we have, when we are mapping a standard, you can extend it. And when you are extending an actual data model, we say, oh, this attribute does not belong to the standard. And we will feed back to the standard. And let me connect with one of the questions that is there. And this is an unsolved answer. I'm asking, why people managing ontologies are so slow at changing it? I don't understand. From my point of view, there is no real reason. But this is what's happening. So we are dealing with many ontologies. We discover some limitations. We feedback and say, please, could you update this? And the average answer is, oh, we'll see that in the next release in 6 months. Okay. No way. But I don't feel that there is a reason for being so let's say, so slow.
Well, I came into a similar example to you. AI Act is published, right? But the standards of the AI Act are not. These are now into those committees, JET, ISO, and I think they're expected in quite some months from now, right? So it will be probably 1 year or something that they come and discuss. So it's a very tangible example on this question. And I also like what you said about the silos. Probably maybe AI is a potential how can I say, optimizer for efficiency in the public sector, where silos can be maybe a little bit more cut and people brought together, because you cannot run projects on AI or interoperability if you stay in your silo. Another question from the audience?
I think what he just described also relates, and I'm sure Razan, you were coming to that, to the first question we have online here. How can domain experts be incentivized to contribute to standardization, where you made a connection with how can we increase the impact in the adoption of semantics in order to support better interoperability and not to just reproduce over and over the same tasks. So, Alberto, would you like to start with that?
Yes, hardly. So what we do is just to provide an official certification of the contribution. We try to make our best, so we include every data model into a Python package called PySmart Data Models, which is also, of course, is free. You can download the code, you can download all the semantics. We give dissemination to the use cases as long as they share the data, and we recognize the contribution in an official list of contributors. We don't pay because we don't have resources for that, but eventually we would do it just to promote the contribution of the main experts. But to be honest, I like to know what's the right answer to make them participate.
Other reactions to that one?
Maybe, I mean, if I look at the steady participation in DCAT-AP, in the DCAT-AP group, I think typically you see that there is, you participate because you see there is a benefit. If I look, okay, you can have standardization on several levels. If I just look at inside the EU institutions, inside the Commission, we are working on the example that I gave earlier with, for instance, this list of countries and territories. What we discussed was that we saw that in the institutions there were 75 different lists circulating with countries and territories. So you can imagine the overhead, the interoperability issues that this created. And then by bringing together domain experts and identifying their use cases, and that really helped to actually develop a data model that covered all the different use cases. So I think it's also on the one hand, the carrot, I think in particular, is that if people see the benefit of the work that they are using, that they contributing, that they then will be more incentivized to participate.
So that's the human side of
Absolutely,
convincing,
absolutely.
showing the benefits, but also taking the initiative of grouping the people together. As from the moment they saw, like, why do we have 75 lists, that they start imagining maybe we could have one fitting better the use cases that we have in grouping the use cases.
But then I think really the use of AI, and that's also where I'm really curious to discuss with Alberto in the coffee break, is how he manages to come in a matter of weeks to come to standardization solutions, because that is really the analysis, the alignment of the different existing resource. I think that is really something where AI can really help us a lot.
I would like to take Emilia and our Finnish colleagues to the question there about the hallucination, because they both mentioned it in their presentations. How do you mitigate the hallucination problem in the RAG chatbot or system? Because RAG can apply not only to chatbots, to search as well, for instance. Supporting a semantic engineer.
For the use case that we did, so with the RAG chatbot, first of all, the idea of using a RAG approach was to limit the hallucination. So having this knowledge base that provides context about the different semantic specification. The idea was really to ground the LLM to the truth. Now, it's not the only solution, and we cannot ensure that you have no hallucination in that case. A thing that we did in addition was to start from a very small knowledge base, keeping really only there the knowledge related to the use case we wanted to explore, to again limit the hallucination, so that he really keeps only information about that are relevant for our use case. And of course then it's about also fine-tuning based on testing, fine-tuning your prompts to find what's the best approach on that. But about hallucination, I think there will be also interesting presentation in the next part. About how we can further mitigate it. I don't know if you want to add something. No?
Okay, in Finland we have been struggling with the hallucination problem quite much. One of the most important things was the kind of understanding that, as everybody who has background in computer science or data science tends to know, that there are different kinds or types of hallucination problem, and not all of them are as relevant to these applications. And what, for example, our tax agency, which has been doing one of the pilot experiments, they have been developing this pipeline for kind of distinguishing the relevant hallucination or the error cases from the irrelevant. And they are kind of developing this method that possibly could be scalable to other Finnish agencies and their pilot experiments. So once again, we are coming back to the interoperability issues by perhaps one of the models that we are now trying to use is to develop the kind of organizational solution to the problem of hallucination by figuring out that, okay, what could be the right pipeline. However, in Finnish context, and this comes back to the legal questions, is that our specific problem with the hallucination is the notion of pre-verification of the correct answers that should be provided by the public authority when they are, for example, giving the citizen advisor by using these chatbots and so on. So Antti, would you like to continue from there?
Yeah, thank you. But basically, the problem of the hallucination basically relates in public activity, in public service. It relates to the problem of the creation of expectations. So if a public authority gives advice or guidance, be through a chatbot, be through phone service, be through email, it creates a certain presumption that, okay, this is the advice I got from the government. I am allowed to act upon this advice, and I can't have any negative repercussions from acting on that advice. I'm sure this is a pretty common principle as well. But it's pretty ironclad, or like laid out in several different legal acts and different principles in the Finnish system. And the end result of this has been that so far our legislation actually forbids the use of chatbots unless the output of the chatbot can be, like Anna-Mari said, unless the output of the chatbot can be verified before it is given to the customer in a transaction. For the reason that we have to make sure that the advice given is, well, if there are errors, at least they are not like severe enough or big enough. Of course, like this principle applies to human given advice as well. So if a human gives advice, that also creates the expectation of the expectation that you can act according to that advice. But of course, there's like a qualitative difference and also a quantitative difference between, like, if a human gives, if you have 200 customer service people and one of them has a misunderstanding and gives that wrong advice to people, that has different results than if you have a chatbot that serves 20,000 people every day and gives every single person the wrong answer. That has like much bigger repercussions on how the system will work.
Thank you. So you mean that you included in the, you have a law,
yes,
mentioning chatbot in the text?
Well, it's called service automation. It's given advice through service automation. We call it a chatbot regulation or the chatbot section, but we did use it in the proposal text. We used chatbot in brackets. Like, okay, it's chatbots.
Interesting. Florian, there are two questions.
I have the next question to Alberto. You said in your talk that consensus is a luxury. And from my experience, we need consensus, otherwise we lose important stakeholders, and then nobody won't use the standard. So what is your opinion and your experience in that?
My experience is that this is a luxury that you cannot afford if you are willing to be on the market. What was the point? So it's true what you say. So if you don't involve all the stakeholders, maybe you can lack of adoption. But what's the consequence of that? The consequence of that is that you have a very slow process. And during this process, people is creating solutions. So people is not willing to diverge because they are willing to diverge, only in some cases with main players. But they have to do something, and they do it. And they do it, they create different incompatible solutions because there is no such a standard. And when you launch the standard, oh, I've already done this. I'm not going to go back because it costs money and so on. And this is what we got. So is wrong what you say? No. But unfortunately, in the current market, when the speed of creation of data is much quicker than your capability to reach consensus, if you reach a consensus in a week, that's fantastic. But this is not happening today.
I believe that's very interesting in connecting to, Willem, what you said about there are different levels of standardization. And what about a hybrid? It's not one or the other, right? And Alberto is what you said as well. And maybe within this community where we are dealing and we are every day working on semantics, we have a tendency to work on long-term consensus-driven approach. And maybe it doesn't mean that people who have urgent needs, if they look into the standards that exist and apply the right practices, they can already create something, I believe, that is quite interesting. And then see if the standard evolves in 2 years' time, they can always evolve.
And there is another barrier that we are not considering because we are experts on data modeling, but people out there are not, are domain experts. And if you are domain expert, you have to create an ontology. The first question is, what is an ontology?
And remember, within SEMIC, we really make the distinction between the models we maintain, and that's, let's be honest, that's very long-lasting process. But that's different from the pilots where we support people on their semantic aspect, and we bring the semantic knowledge, but they bring the domain knowledge. And that comes into also weeks, because it's very specific. We don't need consensus around this, but it can bring consensus afterwards. Once this has been created, it's a starting point, and it's better than doing nothing and related to the I don't know, 70% or 80% you say it doesn't have semantics, or 50% in mobility data space. So yeah, there was also
maybe a last question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. My question is for the chatbot. I'm wondering if you have in your plan to have explainable AI module for explaining to the citizen or the end user the main reasons of the output and the process done. Thank you.
So if I understood correctly the question, it's about if we have something able to explain why the output. Yeah. So you have always, when you receive the answer from the chatbot, the references to the document it uses to create the answer. So that's one point. But for the rest, no, at least not at the moment. But you can see why what he uses to answer you. So what from what document is coming this specific concept it mentions, the specific definition, and so on. I don't know if it answers your question.
But
yeah.
What about asking the chatbot to explain?
Why not? I don't
Which-
know if it will work.
Which is
but
also one of the questions there, how explainability of the outcomes addressed in the various LLM pilots are mentioned. But that's I think, a very wide question, and I think we don't want to keep the audience from the well-deserved coffee after such a long time. I'd like to thank all 5 panelists for the presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and enjoy the coffee. We are back here at 11:30.
11:30.
Good.
For those online, yeah, we'll be back at 11:30, as just mentioned. Great. So I hope the first part was interesting and inspiring for all of you. We had quite some interactions online and on site, and we still so many questions that we couldn't address. But okay, Rome was not built in one day, right? Let's deep dive now into the second part of this workshop. And as you have seen before, here we'll look at the second angle, which is how interoperability actually can also play a role in AI, and how AI impacts us in all our organizations. Just repeating some of the housekeeping rules that you have seen this morning. There's still the QR code and the Wi-Fi connection for anyone that was not there in the first session or just joined. Can I move on, or does anyone need to connect? No? All right. We'll still use Slido as for the first part of the session. You'll have the QR code now. You can also find it online through the SEMIC registration, SEMIC conference page, and we'll display it later on again. But okay, let's move on. Interoperability in support of AI. We see that AI from different angles, with the boom that is now happening for a couple of months, that okay, it creates also quite a lot of challenges from different perspectives, whether from legal point of view, organizational, or all the layers, semantical and technical level. And for there, we have gathered quite an interesting group of speakers that will come and, just as for the first part, present their experience, their insights, and also their challenges when it comes to interoperability and AI. And from there, just as for the first part, you will have the chance to have a panel session afterwards. If we are in time, we can always take one question in between, but otherwise it will be mostly towards the panel. So feel free already to post, not to forget it, your questions also in Slido, and so that other people can also like it, so that we prioritize questions taken. For the speakers, may I invite you to really come to present behind the tribune for the people in the web streaming, so that they can see the slides properly. All right. And now, introducing our first speaker. Thanks, Jeremy Ravenel, to join us today. Jeremy is the CEO of NAS.ai. NAS.ai is a research lab focusing on AI, big surprise. And in specific domains as well, such as asset management. Jeremy will deep dive into how knowledge graphs and LLMs actually interact and how they have big synergies to leverage one from the other. Jeremy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay. So hi everyone. So today I'm going to talk about building trust in AI, which is quite a challenging thing to do. I'm going to share my 2 cents about this, drawn from my experience, and I'm going to share a bit more about where I come from. A few, so the bullet points that we're going to try to address today are introduction to the trust challenge, semantic interoperability and how we should address it. Knowledge graph, is it the AI trust backbone? The ABI project, which is the project that we have built with my team. It's not AGI, it's ABI for artificial business intelligence, so nothing to do with the story that OpenAI is trying to sell us. And impact on trust and views on the future of AI, basically. Again, the views are my own. This is just my perspective from having played a bit with the technology and coming from the business background that I have. So in a nutshell, I often like to present myself as a farm boy. I've grown up in Brittany, France, surrounded by nature. I've been spending most of my time observing nature and understanding how things are connected. So interoperability is what I like from my very young age, and understanding how things work. I turned data mercenary for C-level people when I grew up a little bit and started my business school, and I became really curious about one specific topic, which is cash management, because cash management is actually the topic in business that connects many of the different aspects of a business together. So when you're trying to do a cash forecast, for example, you need to understand everything from how revenue is generated to cash flow and how to explain it. So in that sense, I've already been working with those kinds of concepts like knowledge graph and how interoperability without really realizing it when I was doing it at that time. I was serving CEOs, CFOs on different industries. And I turned entrepreneur because I couldn't fix what I wanted to fix from the inside. So I went outside of the organization to try to provide my services to the business. And everything that I'm doing is really about how do we make our digital lives less chaotic, because I really felt from the moment that I started working in organization that we were way beyond what I expected to be in terms of how fluid the work with the digital application was. So my main driver is how to make that less chaotic, basically. Key issues in AI development I see, but we talked about it already. High-profile errors, bias and discrimination from the training data set. Privacy concerns, obviously. Economic impact, lack of the consumer trust. Regulatory challenges. I guess that you guys know where I'm getting to. It's not really safe right now to really completely trust a system. And what I advocate for is saying that LLMs, large language models, should not be trusted at any cost, because they need to be part of a bigger ecosystem to be trusted. And this is what I mean with this schema and trying to go from a consumer perspective. So when you are a consumer, you have an intent. You want to ask an LLM something. You basically have a command. You command the system to give you information. And what I've developed with my team, basically with this idea of observing nature and chaos and order that is in everything that we see outside, is about how do we define this chaos and order management? What tool do we use for managing chaos? What tool do we use to manage order? And right now, it seems like vector search and what Emilien showed us with similarity search is really good at managing chaotic documents that kind of have semantic similarity to it. But if you want to ground the LLM to really trustful answers, you need to get to a knowledge graph at some point, because it will really be the tool that you're going to use to explain and understand what happened and why the answers you were given is to be trusted or not. And of course, there is the sources, the producer intent. The moment where I write a document, I need to be able also to go back to it. So there is a dance to be doing around this different system. You need to be able to adapt and move, and this is a living entity that you're trying to build. If you want to use interoperability foundations and apply it to AI, it needs to be moving. So I often take this allegory of the dance. The objective is really about common language, more accuracy, collaboration enhanced, compliance. So slowly we can try fixing the big problems that I've stated before in the first slide. The visual representation that I like to get to is this yin and yang combination of two forces, where LLM is one side and knowledge graphs and ontologies are the other side. And if you want to create that entity you want to trust, you need to basically get to this ensemble of things, this yin-yang version of your system. It will enable you to basically have richer context, because it will know a bit of your background. You will have the ability to do dynamic learning, so meaning you can update that knowledge graph with your data more frequently than an LLM can be, because you know that there is like cutoff dates on those things. So you want to be able to dynamically add knowledge. It will provide transparency, because knowledge graph obviously enable you, as I said, to trace the hops that you're going to do when you ask a question. It's going to go through multiple nodes, and that's going to be very interesting for explainability. I come back from finance, so you can imagine that like having a numbers that I can trust is kind of central, and explaining this number is also important. So that's also why we came from this side. And a last point that is critical, I think, and often overlooked, is the interdisciplinary insight. So if I want to explain my cash flow, I need to understand what happens above it. Like, is it a problem of less ads put online that resulted in less conversion, resulted in less revenue, a sales guy that went away, an operator that was fired, that is not here anymore? Like, how do you connect all those dots to explain the end goal, which is really money at the end of the day? So that's I think where also knowledge graph was very interesting. And when I started my journey to business, I didn't quite know that everything like this was possible, but I'm happy to be here now, because it's like the best time to do it now, I think, and to try to move the ball a little bit higher than what I saw in the first place when I started working. So if we zoom into what we are doing, we created this ABI project, Artificial Business Intelligence, very thought-provoking to the AGI idea, because we think that it's completely useless to think about AGI. But being very grounded to like open interoperability of a business and try to see a business holistically is really what we're trying to do here. So we define basically 6 engines, which are assistants, so to speak. You have assistants on the front end. You will talk to different assistants with different domain expertise, but you have engines in the back end that are basically crunching data, organizing it in certain tables, and then providing that table as food for the assistant to interact with you, basically, and have like knowledge. So if you see the central point is this, the green point is basically this ABI system that centralizes those different engines. And then you have all the different tables that you can see as white dots. And they are all about a flywheel, essentially. So how do I go from post to interaction, from interactions to people, from people to companies, from companies to contacts, from contacts to deals? And the idea of traversing those different data models is central to be able to have an holistic system that can cover most of the work that you need this AI system of yours to do. I don't know if you can see from there, but basically a few ideas on the architecture that we've built is about data sources on the left, templates. You want to template your different tasks and bundle those tasks into this, what we call the ABI repository that connects all those domains together. So it's basically code that is going to be run, orchestrated, and published to the storage layer right here, to a knowledge graph, a vector search, and a file object storage classic. So you remember this first slide that I showed you? Knowledge graph, vector, and file storage. You also want to provide those three storage layers to your system. And at the end of the day, you're going to expose it through an API that is going to be connected to your user workspace. And there happens the mix of assistant. We call it the mixture of assistant. You're going to be able to mix different assistants together and perform the work of analysis that you were probably doing in 10, 20 days with different analysts going from here and there, trying to crunch numbers to reduce it at the maximum that you can do. And if the system cannot answer, there's a feedback loop that can come back to your data team, and then you can edit and iterate on the quality of the knowledge graph below. That's the whole idea. And my views of, I don't know how much time do we have left, but my views on this is like what we're doing with ABI is just basically one tiny example. Alberto was talking about an example, like this is an example. This is just one perspective. But I think that there is a pattern that we need to think of, which is like three main things, like personal AI system, business AI, and institutional AI. And if those three are very wired to outcomes, like individualized assistance for personal AI, enterprise intelligence for business, institutional AI targeted to citizen well-being, then we target those systems to specific outcomes that can make sense in building a flywheel that is resulting from that. So how do I go to citizen well-being? There is different steps, different engines, different tables that I need to organize around that. So it's really like a user-centric kind of design that can enable us to this flywheel ABI, you understood, like you take open data, transfer to content, marketing, sales, etc. But you have also personal AI. Think about health. Your level of health will determine your ability to be educated on some topics. Your ability to be educated on some topics will infer on your finances and how much money you can make about your education. This will relate to your relationships. Like right now, my level of education enabled me to get a job that enables me to be in front of you today and to build those relationships with people into a field and eventually infer on the content that I read, because next couple of days, maybe I will have more content to read around all those semantic topics. And then it infers on the tasks that I have to manage every single day. So I just wanted to put that idea into perspective to share that for me, it's not about just the data points, but the connection of those data points together. And that's probably what I wanted to explain right here. I can come back there if we have the panel discussion, because I think it's already time. So yeah, that's it. I think there is a networks of networks to be built. And if you want to follow very interesting people, I suggest Tony Seal on LinkedIn. He's one of the guys that I get the most inspiration from. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy, for a very interesting discussion on how we can improve trust in large language models. Another challenge is how can we improve the discoverability and reusability of AI models. If you look at the number of open source models which are available, it's in the hundreds, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a big challenge there in describing what these models are capable of and what data sets they are based on. So the next speakers will discuss a possible solution for that. They propose to use a standard for describing these machine models. So we have Emidio Stani, a technical expert working for PwC Technology Consulting, and his colleague Arthur Schiltz, which is also a technology consultant in the same company, which will present their suggestion to how to solve this problem.
Let's see. How do we go to the next one? All right, so thank you, and thank you everyone for joining this session. We will talk about the discoverability of AI models and tying it back into, and how we can use interoperability for AI. So the agenda for this session is, first, we will look at the need for MLD-CAT-AP or standardization within the machine learning environment, and then how MLD-CAT-AP can solve these questions or these challenges that exist in the environment. And last, we have a call for action for you. So first, to contextualize this a bit, let's take a look at dataset cataloging, the notion of dataset cataloging, and DCAT-AP. So we see that in the world of all the datasets, there is an issue of findability and reusability of such data, and also the exchange of datasets or catalogs in general. And then around these different areas, for example, of open data or the European data spaces, or as well high-value dataset regulation, where there is description and cataloging of datasets that have been identified as being high value, we see that we need a semantic layer. And the semantic layer is DCAT-AP, which enables the exchange of these catalogs by offering standardized descriptions and making exchange available across different platforms, in the end resulting in improved findability and reusability of data and catalogs. One example is, of course, data.europa.eu, the official data portal of the European Union, where we can find more than 1.7 million datasets across 185 different catalogs. Now, these problems of discoverability and findability, these also exist in the machine learning space. So we see that in this space, there is a rapid growth, and hundreds of thousands of models are emerging across different platforms. And on these platforms, there is the same issue of findability, but also reusability, transparency, and reproducibility. Now, on the other hand, there is also the compliance aspect, which comes from regulation, where we see there has to be a certain transparency or documentation on AI systems, like would be the case for the AI Act. And these are exactly the problems or the issues that MLD-CAT-AP will also try to tackle, on which later more. Now, to start this, I would like to ask who has already used a machine learning platform like Hugging Face, like Kaggle, a raise of hands perhaps. Okay, so we can see that there are some active users of these platforms in the room. And to start the process of the development of MLD-CAT-AP, we wanted to start from the challenges that the users and providers of these platforms are facing. And we find that findability, for example, is a big challenge in terms of model selection because of poor description, non-standardized values of this metadata, but also reproducibility, where it can be difficult to reproduce experiments without proper documentation on how they were done. Then there's the quality of the data model or the data set that was used to build the machine learning model, And it can also be very hard to determine what exactly the quality of the model is or the data that we use. And of course, lastly, there are the risks associated with the model, especially from the perspective of a user. There will be certain risks that for certain use cases are not tolerable, and they have to be identified before starting use of this machine learning model. Now we see that these 4 challenges, they are all connected to the platforms because this is where they become findable, but also this documentation on the models can be found. And then especially quality and risk, these are issues that are related to compliance or with regulation, like would be the case in the AI Act. Now if we take a look at the perspective of the provider, this is a little bit of a different angle because the provider wants to publish their models and they want to maximize their impact. But this can be difficult because different platforms can have different data structures, so the effort to publish the model, to make it findable, has to be repeated over and over again. And then next, there is, of course, the fact of transparency, and that under regulation, there will be the requirement to disclose certain information on, for example, the algorithm used, how it was trained, and how you can use the model. Now, my colleague Emilio will go over how MLDKDP can answer these challenges.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you. To next. Thank you. Indeed, MLDKDP is proposed as a solution to overcome such challenges. Challenges that, on one end, affect end user, but they have to be solved also from the provider of machine learning models. When you look at MLDKDP, the position of MLDKDP is under machine learning, building, and evaluation. It's a process that starts, in general, from data collection towards a generated prediction. It involves different steps. If I want to be a provider of a machine learning model, I need to go towards data preparation, choosing the learning algorithm, training the model, evaluating the model, and then after all, I can generate prediction. So I can run the model afterwards. MLDKDP, as you can see, starts from where it's ready. So we don't tackle transformation or, let's say, provenance of the data itself. We start when we have a data set. And then, after that, we can choose, we can evaluate the quality of such a data set, but also choose the algorithm, etc. And we provide also how the model can be trained. What you are not able to see, I think, overall classes, but this is the UML class diagram of the MLDKDP 2.0. Part of the big part of in red, it's the concepts are reusing from DKTP, in particular data sets and distribution, because they are helpful indeed, as you can see, from a data preparation part. But on the right-hand side, we have also parts of the quality of the data, because we will see also later on, the quality of the data associated to the data set is really relatively important. Other concepts are included, like algorithm or machine learning model class 2, and the risk, especially because they are coming from the AI Act. The AI Act demands, it's a risk-based approach, so demands risk associated to a certain machine learning model. And after all, the prediction as a data set as output on our machine learning model. So these are usually all the components that a data provider has to go through, but an end user that if want to use all these, access to all these concepts, needs to use it, because they need to know how I can reproduce the same results by choosing an algorithm or by looking at the quality of the data. What we see here, an example of the datasets in OpenML platform. It's like the Hugging Face. Here it's a dataset on credit G, so it's we have a title, we have an identifier, a format, some keywords, and a description. And these are already this is already metadata that's already inside a DKTP in the dataset and distribution class, which we enriched in order to adapt to other type of datasets in the case of machine learning models. Over here, we see also an example from machine learning model in Hugging Face. Different models nowadays are published on Hugging Face, really many of them. But the thing is, the fundability is really left to the provider. If we have a title, we have maybe a type, we have a license and the languages, but the rest of the metadata, which is including a limitation, bias, and also training process, are really left to the provider. So it's not structured. And if it's not structured, you cannot find it. That's why we try to create, indeed, in this machine learning model class, different metadata that will be helpful, at least to compare and to find your machine learning model. The case here is Bloom. Bloom is quite famous because it's an open source machine learning model, and then they try also to make really everything disclosed as much as possible. Another main component of the model is the algorithm class, together with the parameter settings. because an algorithm is useful for reproducibility. If I want to choose the algorithm, I need to look many of them. Some of them are here listed in the like Bayesian algorithm or deep learning or reinforcement learning. Some of them already mentioned in the AI Act. We need really take into account when we select the algorithm. This concept comes also from the machine learning ontology, because the MLDKTP is an application profile based on DKTP, but reuse concept from other type of ontologies, which is the machine learning Sailor ontology, developed by the Q11. And so there, for example, we are using the class algorithm in order to allow to select the type of algorithm for the machine learning model. I would say last but not least, quality and risk. We mentioned about the quality of the data. Platforms already provide some means, I would say, to end user to evaluate the quality of their data set. We see some example here about Hugging Face and Kaggle. At least it's possible to see how the data, if there are unique values, for example, or there is some certain range of values. The thing is, quality is also demanded in the AI Act, especially for high-risk AI systems. They need to show there is a high-quality data behind. Especially in the health and safety sector, this is really extremely important. Aside the quality, risk, as already mentioned, the AI Act is a risk-based approach, considering probability and severity. If you look right now in those platforms, really few providers describe risk and limitation associated with machine learning models. And it's really difficult to find this information. So we need to start to describe and to at least to structure them so we can evaluate them. What you see in this slide is also the original intent of MLDKTP. It's not just top-down from the AI Act, but also bottom-up, because we've done an analysis of different platforms, so Hugging Face, Kaggle, PyTorch, and Azure AI, to try to find common metadata among them in order to create a model that is at least interoperable with all different type of platforms. And that's why you see that this machine learning model classes start to become, includes, I would say, a lot of metadata, but also different type of classes associated. For example, the bibliographic reference to the paper, because in the AI Act, one of the things is also how that the provider needs to provide technical documentation about it. Usually, the machine model is describing in their own paper. So there is a reference to a paper associated with machine learning model class. Aside the risk, or other type of relations, like, for example, if the machine model is being fine-tuned or has certain variations. Then I go to next one. So I invite you, all of you, to go to the MLDKTP. Like for other case in SEMIC, we want to create a community. We've been engaged already with certain actors, as I said, with the Q11, for example, in that sense, because indeed there is an intent to describe machine learning models and all the rest around it. We would like to create a community. We started with a pilot with OpenML. Then we want to enlarge this to the different type of platform that exist out of there. So either going towards our specifications on GitHub or towards the SEMIC Support Center. So you could go there. And so if you have any contact with the also existing platforms, so we could contact them and try to see how MLDKTP can enter can be useful for them. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you for this very interesting presentation in how we can improve the interoperability of machine learning models. The final speaker in this session is Razvan Petroradu, who will from the Publications Office of the European Union, who will discuss a more practical approach to interoperability. He will discuss the results of a study into the interoperability of chatbots used in public administrations. Chatbots are being increasingly used by public administrations, and the big challenge is having these chatbots talk to each other in order to have an interoperable solution when you ask questions to a chatbot. Peter?
Thank you, Hans. Sometimes we have trouble in connecting and talking between humans. Now imagine between chatbots. So, hello again for those who are here in the morning. I'm going to talk about an existing project. So it's premiere. For the very first time, we unveil a little bit of the results. It just started 6 months ago, so it's actually preliminary results. I would be happy to come back next year and show maybe closer to end results. The project is about interoperability of public administration chatbots, but not only that. Publication Office also give a little bit another perspective than Willem this morning. We are a hub of excellence for information, data, and knowledge management on behalf of European institutions. And obviously for us, transparency and trustworthiness are essential in what we provide, and that's why it's very much in line with what we discuss in AI. That's the agenda. I will skip it. What is the project background? The project background, it has 3 strands. Now, if the regie helps me, yeah, it works alone. Good. We created this little animation which explains the first objective is to make 2 bots of 2 different public administrations talk together, and that's a practical example. If you ask my chatbot about how to renew a driving license in Portugal, it's not my domain of knowledge, it's not my content, I don't have any idea, but maybe the Interior Ministry in Portugal will be able to provide you that, and connect and then provide the end answer. The second topic would be similar, but doing it with consumer chatbots. What about today in your kitchen or in your car? You ask Alexa or you ask your BMW about getting maps of European Union or about anything that's related to travel rights, and then we prefer to give the authentic answer from the legislation. And last but not least, something which is quite common, would like to have in the bots providing, the synthesized, summarized answer to a specific question, preferably non-hallucinated and very accurate. So that's why we have a specific topic to be treated with the Q&A. So these are the 3 strands, and well, no need to argue for the need of establishing that kind of interoperability between the member states, but also there is a lot to gain into the seamless success across borders. And guess what? This project, I think, we believe it helps a lot into the new act, the new Interoperable Europe Act, which actually will oblige public administrations to go this way, and we hope that the study will actually help them into increasing maturity and into strengthen the understanding of the key topics to touch upon. My Finnish colleagues this morning touched also about the various levels of interoperability. While it's very relevant in this practical case, technical interoperability is obvious about sending data and about capturing them, exchanging the data. The semantic interoperability is making sense out of them, in understand the data, while the organizational level starts to get a bit more complicated here, and coordination between 2 public organizations is not something which is very easy, was never easy, and ending up with signing agreements, having a legal interoperability framework, which basically sets up the legal basis of having this happening. Very importantly, again, the Finnish colleagues gave a very good example this morning on a national level. But that's the same applies at the international level. Now, very preliminary view of what we were looking at today. We see good examples in Finland. If I'm not wrong, the immigration office, the patent office, and the taxation office. There is already a very good test case with Camus, Verobot, and Patrek, as they named, and they interoperate between each other. There is another good example, which was actually talked about in last SEMIC, in Madrid, bureaucrat in Estonia, as a mesh of bots. There is a very nice project bringing together a lot of countries in Europe, I think 18 in total, under the theme of tax administrations, and they are really very much engaged into defining that interoperability framework and really communicate about the various tax administrations across Europe. And the project runs under Fiscalis. Now, that's Europe. On the right side of the picture, we looked at some examples from outside Europe, Singapore. We have in India, and there is a very important international network of experts called Open Voice Network. They are very active in conversational AI summits and regularly online with webinars and specific meetings. And their reason of existence is interoperability. So they want to set a standard for voice-enabled systems, especially. So they very much focus on voice, but most of the things, voice is more complicated than chat. So if it works for voice, it will most probably work for chat as well. Benefits, why do we do that? Well, the first and very importantly, from a user and citizen perspective, my bot or your bot will never be able to give the answer to everything. It's obvious, no? So it will probably be, it is designed to serve an answer from a very specific domain of knowledge, and yours from your specific domain of knowledge. Let's suppose we do a good job, both of us, and we provide super results and accurate results and a good user experience. Well, the questions of citizens typically for a public administration are not matching the organization of the public administration itself. The question will be quite wide, covering probably multiple domains of knowledge, and not only one ministry or one government. So that therefore bridging the content domain of both, it's probably an obvious benefit. The same in cost effectiveness. Those two administrations will be eventually able to leverage and share and reuse the technologies and leverage the lessons learned. The same in analytics and understanding the user behavior, leading all towards better citizens and user adoption. Obviously, if we have less frustrated users leaving a conversation in a chatbot, you can also assume you have more user adoption and more happy users in that bot. Challenges, there are many. I just put some that will be in the study as well. Well, we both need to invest into our own infrastructure. Eventually, if we start now and have this in mind, we can talk together and leverage the technologies and the experiences I laid down. And then I would like to stop on the word both. We have somehow, we are a little bit biased in thinking that interoperability is between you and me. What about the interoperability between me, you, and him, and she, and her? Because when we talked at the coffee break, it was sometimes 1-to-1, sometimes it was 1-to-3, 1-to-4, even 4 people talking, 5 people talking. What about that? I think today it's quite a challenge to have such use cases being covered by bots, especially by voice bots. Governance models are different. Of course, if I want to connect the publication office chatbot with the Finnish chatbot, well, we don't have the same governance in place. Let's align on that. Language barriers, it's probably becoming less and less, but it's still there. As more we implement the semantic interoperability, less this becomes a problem, but obviously it's still a problem if my bot is in English and that bot is in Finnish. Let's see how this works. It can work, but let's see how. The Fiscalis guys, for instance, they go clearly on the, they took already an approach in what they do on semantic interoperability using standard vocabularies. So their solution is using a standard vocabulary for taxation, and basically all questions will be let's say assign an intent, what you said in the first presentation. They will actually try to ultimately assign it to an intent which corresponds to a specific topic from a standardized vocabulary, and then only at that moment shoot to the corresponding chatbot in the other country. But this gives them trustability that it is the precise topic which the people, the user asked initially would be, the answer will be coming from that. Conversation flows, the handoffs, error handling, all that are big challenges into maintaining a good user experience, into having engagement for users, but ultimately not having them left in the desert. Consent and session management, we don't even scratch the surface yet for privacy, and I will still have mentioned the privacy later. Now, risks are many for the public administrations, but I would like to resume it on the accuracy. We heard in the morning that Finland has something in place in the legislation. I was surprised to actually find myself that actually forbids giving answers to the end user if it's not verified. Yeah, so it has to be verified. It has to basically, we cannot let the bot talk to the end user by his own having his own head. But the data breach is the possibility, the outcomes, the legal reputation for the public administrations in providing an answer which is not coherent from legislation. If you have a bot on taxation or legislation, you want a precise answer. I'm sorry, but it will not be acceptable to have something which is approximately like that. Or in other cases, you cannot accept that. In most of the cases for the public administration, you cannot accept that for the first 10,000 users you have an answer, and then for the other 10,000 users you have a different answer. So consistency and coherency are actually very important risks to be considered by the public administrations. Now, in tangible, concrete outcomes, the key considerations for the interoperability of chatbots, because that's what we want to have at the end in the study, is a framework of a receipt, kind of receipt that every public administration can take it and say implement an interoperability project. The key considerations are the key aspects. So chatbot types, there are different ones. You want to not limit it to only that kind of chatbot. So maybe it uses LLM, maybe not. Maybe it's a more classical rule-based approach, maybe not. Maybe it's intent-based. You have to consider that, but it matters. How do you map intent-based to what Pascal was saying this morning, discoverability free, really free speech, LLM. Data sets, so the domains of knowledge, what I call domains of knowledge, data sets and the integration. The conversational flows, what is really the best practice? And the way I handle a conversation maybe is different than the way you handle a conversation. And that is the basis where we accept today by experts in conversational AI, the conversational flow is essential. That's where design stands into a chatbot, not into the. It's more on the. Let's say I put it like that today. It lies much more into the flow and designing and good conversation than into the data part. Data is very important, but the key aspect for the chatbot is the conversation. So. How do I make sense? How do we take? What risk do we take, and what approach do we take to go from the conversation I have, let's say in Italy, to the conversation I have in Sweden? The conversations are different. For the same topic, the conversation will be different in Italy and in Sweden. It will not be the same. The way people talk is not the same. So the kind of filtering, the questions, the feedback will be different. So this has to be looked at. Licensing and contract, yeah, but do we do what? Do we do an NDA? Do we do a non-boarding project? What about data privacy? In publication office, for instance, our bot has full public data, so we didn't need to care about privacy, although, you will have a link there, we considered with the DPO that we need to have a privacy notice because we use voice, and voice in many jurisdictions is considered private data attention. So we do not handle any specific name or data, but we use voice. So voice, it is considered in different jurisdiction private data. So we have that privacy notice. Language, I mentioned the language, but one aspect that the study wants to focus also in is the low resource languages. Well, I'm really looking forward to have discussion because we didn't have initial discussion with Estonia, but having a bot in Estonian or in Maltese or in, I know, Slovak, it's very different than having it in English, French, and German. The challenges are different. I know, for instance, Luxembourg. Yes, Luxembourgish is a language, and Luxembourg had to index in order to train and to do a chatbot index all the articles of all the press in the last I know how many years, because the quantity was not big enough to really have accurate results easily. And security. To make it short, you want to offer the people the ability to have broader answers and to the system to interoperate, but I don't want that my bot is DDoSed or it's put completely out of order because 1 million inquiries are coming from Finland or from Portugal for the driving license. So you need to make sure that in terms of denial of service, just to take one example, it's feasible. So you want to control that probably to perimeter, I don't know. Now, just taking some examples, what I said earlier about the conversation flow, we think that from what we've seen and what we discussed up to now, there are more or less three ways to have interoperability in practice. The first one is everything happens into my own chatbot. So the handling of the interoperability is in the back office background. You don't see it. It's like you phone today. What do we have in Belgium? The phone operator Orange. I don't know. I take an example. You have phone Orange. You have a question, and they say, "Okay, I cannot answer. Wait a second. Please bear with me 30 seconds." Then the person will phone to left to right, and then will get the answer, and then come back to the answer to you. That's exactly what it happens between humans today. The number two is that the host will redirect the user to the other bot interface, and then there are options there already. Should I share the context of my conversation? Should I not share the context of my conversation? But the point is that, I cannot answer you the question. You asked me about the driving license in Portugal. I cannot answer you this question. It's not in my. But I know that the Interior Ministry of Portugal has this information. Do you allow me to forward you there? Yes, no. Maybe you say no. Everything ends up here. But if you say yes, well, it opens another conversation in that chatbot. And again, the question is, should I share the rest of the context or not? To be seen. Probably it's interesting to share so that you do not ask again the same question and all the whole context of the conversation. You want an answer. And the third option, which we believe for now is the most costly to implement, is that you handle the whole conversation into your interface. So you identify that the questions and the answers from your conversation in a way, let's say in blue, and once you start getting information and content from the other bot, you identify it in the design in, let's say, in yellow, but you still need the kind of consent. And there we talk about really integration. So you need to probably connect the APIs and handle all the conversation there. But there are many other aspects of the conversational flow to consider, like how in this case, any of the three, how do you consider the feedback? How do you consider the use of the emojis? How do you consider the idle? You wait there, nothing happens. Well, you handle that in your bot usually somehow, but is the other bot handling it the same way? Probably not. The communication style, again, kind of language, what is funnier, less funnier, legal, very rigid. You have a lot of contextual elements, the response time, the transparency, and voila, just a few considerations. Now, in terms of mechanisms, why do we need a mechanism? Let me tell you, why do we need a mechanism? Well, I gave an example that somebody asks the publications office, Publio chatbot, about changing the driver license. And I say, okay, I can forward it to the Ministry of Interior. But how the heck do I know about the Ministry of Interior? How my bot does know about that? And actually, it's the simplest question is the most complicated. How do we make sure my bot has the trustable, let's say, list of directory of all the other bots, and this having it once, but this having it all the time updated also, because probably it changes, no? In 1 year time, I don't know if I can rely on the same bots. I don't know if they answer the same way and so on and so forth. So we think there are, for now in the study, there are two ways of doing it. It's the what is called central knowledge directory, so a directory, which could be the joiner portal, by the way. It's not a call for action, it's just an idea. According to the Interoperability Act, there is the interoperable portal, yeah, where you have a central source for this kind of services. So it could be, why not, a directory which is constantly updated and where you have trustable sources for the specific domains of knowledge. Or this can be completely decentralized. I'm not talking about blockchain here, but about the principle of decentralization. And you can have such a layer which is residing at the level of the bot. It is basically what the Finnish chatbots did, because they know about each other, but they know each other in their network. They know abroad, outside of that perimeter. It's a little bit how the network protocols work as well. I can ping a little bit, I can ask around everybody, but on my network, and I can find those people out, and eventually trust, that's the second part, but I cannot go beyond. So eventually this can work in some cases, the other one in some cases, but we don't have the pros and cons for each and everyone. And the point was not today to go into these details. This is a graphical representation of what I've just said, to have a common, let's say, directory, centralized information of the trustable sources versus decentralized layer, allowing each bot to communicate with its peers. Data protection, well, I touched a little bit. What do we do about that? Especially if you are talking to a public administration, you need to give your address, you need to identify yourself eventually, I don't know. There are consents to be given. How do you handle the consent in multiple conversation? How do you handle the consent if you give away? Does the user will understand that he's talking to a completely different different bot, and different privacy rules apply? We don't know about that. And then ultimately, most bots, we believe, for public administration, most will be having transparency obligations when it comes to the AI Act. I put an example, our example of handling transparency with an accessibility notice, which is available on the publication office site, and where we explain to the end users what is happening, what kind of data are processed, how they are processed, why, and in a meaningful and easy to understand language. But we believe, again, that transparency, so low risk, would be applicable for most of the bots, not all, but most of the bots. Well, the key at the end of the day is to have people work together and administrations work together to sit at the same table and discuss all these topics. But what we will try to help, as I said it, and this is the last slide, this is what we will try ultimately to provide. So a kind of framework where public administration could take and not directly implement, but to actually design their future bots or update the existing bots with interoperability in mind, and starting enable it slowly. It will only happen on specific use cases. I think this morning session also talked about we cannot achieve everything in one step. There will be specific business cases and use cases to start with. The taxation one is a very specific one, and also covering wide population. Voila. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks a lot, Razvan. for the very interesting presentation and covering all the aspects of interoperability, the different layers. I propose we move on to the panel discussion, and Razvan, don't run away. You'll have a place at together with Arthur, Emilio, and Jeremy, of course. Yeah, voila. Here's back the slide with the QR code. And let's wait, still 30 seconds for everyone to join. Yeah, I see everyone is connecting. Can we show on screen Slido directly, please? Yeah, great, thanks. I think the first question was more for the previous, yeah. So maybe let's start with a question from the online participants related to ML de KDP. And the question is simply, would you like to comment, Emilio, Arthur, on the adoption by services, open or not, machine learning platforms, and the relation to EOSC, the the European Open Science Cloud, and yeah, others. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Currently, we've finished the pilot with OpenML, and it was really difficult for them to put, let's say, resources in place to start to change their model when publishing machine learning models, and the rest of the task. Indeed, the adoption until now with the platform, let's say, it doesn't exist yet, because the idea is, first of all, to focus on adherence with the AI Act. Now the AI Act has been published by the Commission, by the Parliament, and soon by the Council. There are different annexes that needs to be integrated into the MLDKTP. So for us, that's the top priority. The relation with the OEC, I know about their work. They even did a portal also with publishing machine learning models. For me, it's indeed another platform. We could indeed contact them. That cannot be excluded. Concerning the identifier for machine learning algorithm, that is a question that once we agree in all the classification for all the machine learning algorithms, then we can publish identifiers. So that's about indeed reference data for the time being. It will come. It's a matter indeed to agree on the type of algorithm that needs to be in that list of classification list.
Which will also, I understand, come from partially or together with the AI Act implementation.
Yes, as well, because they need to be covered in that. They need to be covered in that list. Yes.
Yeah, and I believe what you mentioned about the connection with Hugging Face or platforms in general is exactly related to the call for action that you made towards the end of the presentation, which is and also connecting to the first the first part we had today or this morning, where this was, I understand, a pilot initiative starting from the bottom and really trying to, together with OpenML, define one extension which would fit the needs around machine learning models. And from there now trying to reach a broader consensus with other platforms, which proves to also be challenging because now we need to convince them to sit at the table to say, look, this is what we have done. Is it also interesting for you, and entering again into the benefits or convincing part?
Indeed, I believe that next year will be quite interesting for the future of it.
Great. Thanks, Emilio. Maybe, Jeremy, looking a bit at you. you presented a quite nice graphs with the flywheels, etc. In your presentation, but do you have concrete use cases from your experience or that you know that show concretely, for example, with the personal AI that you mentioned and so on, how this works and where knowledge graphs and RAG are actually implemented together?
Yeah, so it's actually running on my company business. And I have 3 companies that I cannot disclose, basically, that are using the system that we have created. What I can share is that along the way of learning how to approach this problem, it all comes down to the flow and the conversation that you're going to have with the interface. So as much as you can design the questions, you can then design better the knowledge graph and what goes into the knowledge graph, what goes into the vector search, because you realize that a lot of information, like most of the information, is not structured, it's chaotic, and you need to address it with a vector search, and then knowledge graph comes to play. So it's a really hands-on approach. If you think about like concrete use cases, you really need to go inside a business, understand the business flywheel, like I was trying to demonstrate, and then only you can double-click on each element, understand how the data is structured, if any of this data is related to some common semantics and ontologies and like dictionaries that we all know. And then what you see in terms of concrete results in terms of outputs, the quality of the output is crazy. That the difference between without a knowledge graph and with a knowledge graph is dramatically different. You can really trust the system 2-3 times more, because like considering that the semantic approach is just giving you the most closest relation to a number, you can't really trust that if you're in finance. So there is no comparison or no way to actually even weight the 2 options. They are to be considered together for different use cases. And that's the learning that at least we got from now.
And since today we have mostly through the SEMIC community public administrations coming with the interest of the citizens and businesses, organizations, but through public service oriented or angle, what would you tell them? Because sometimes it's maybe more difficult for them to have this close relationship, for example, with citizens, to hear them, what are their needs and so on. So how would you advise them to tackle this?
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to say at the last slide when I was showing institutional AI and how those different steps like research, how we research inform education and programs and stuff. So I think that it's about organization and institution like you to sit on the user chair and understand what's the actual flywheel that I have as a citizen of this like part of the institution. So I would like to understand how the AI Act is sources. What are the basis on which the AI Act has been created? So what are the research nodes that the AI Act has been taking? And all those different things leading to how I can use it now, and how as a citizen I can trust like a chatbot that comes from my government that will explain what I need to do or what I don't need to do. So yeah, my point is it's all about user experience at the end of the day, and understanding the flow and how people are going to interact with it to serve them the best. Yeah.
Thank you. Razan, would you like to continue on that and the connection with the chatbot side, and maybe also to the point that Jeremy where he referred, and I think there are questions about that as well, related to the AI Act and how it will influence interoperability, maybe for the specific case of chatbots?
Well, I think it was before last slide for us. For what the study shows up to now is that most chatbots will fall into the low risk, and this doesn't mean you don't do anything, but it's a transparency obligation. So it means explainability. It still means trustworthiness, and obligation towards the AI Act does not save you from the obligation of having a good user experience, because if your chatbot is not used, you can be compliant to everything, but it's useless. So you need to balance both. So user experience, I also believe, is the most important, and where you put your potatoes should be around the user experience and the flow and the engagement, the conversation itself. Technology, it comes second, and then compliance comes, security come even before even technological aspect. So now in other areas which might be potentially health, then we start discussing about a lot of personal data, about potential decisions that might impact human lives, and there the degree of classification will rise to probably high, and there you need to comply with those rules. Now, hopefully, the standards which we mentioned this morning, the standards coming with the AI Act will help into implementing the right processes, not only for businesses but also for the public administrations equally. And those standards, I think, are the practical, so let's say the implementable reading of the AI Act itself when it comes to how to ensure what you need to do when you fall under that or that.
Thank you. And considering some of the points that were mentioned this morning about the fact that we need, as semantic modelers, to act or to be faster, simply put, in how we deal with the evolution in the market and the market needs. What are your takes on the same aspect? So the speed at which we operate when it comes to the chatbots. How do you see this evolving? Do you think it will take years before we arrive at certain levels of maturity in the interoperability between chatbots, or are we talking about maybe 1 year? Or how do you see this evolving? And also not only about the timing, because that might be very tricky to answer, but also the approach taken.
Well, that's an easy question. It will take years. Yes, and not for interoperability, for the chatbots themselves. If you look, we don't, with what we looked in the study, we are far away from having every country having at least a chatbot for the public administration in production. There are a lot of tests, there are a lot of proof of concepts, there are a lot of initiatives, but very few countries and even European institutions have one running in production today, right? So I think it is a learning curve there, which is exactly about the conversation, about the user experience. It took years for the web itself, so it will take years to have. That's a new interface, a new way of interacting with natural language with the content and with the administrations, yeah, and also with the companies. It's the same thing. So until there are risks, there are opportunities. Until we start mastering that, it will take years. We see it takes years. Now, interoperability, it also will just contribute to the complexity. I think I try to explain a little bit on it. Now, we have a little advantage there, is that from the technology perspective, it advances quicker than other previous technology waves. That's one thing. The second is that we talk already now about interoperability, and hopefully if we have this framework, for instance, we can actually start designing from scratch something which is interoperable. So we don't put our systems up or digital services for public administration up, and then in 10 years we start talking about interoperability. So it takes 15, 20 years to happen. So hopefully we'll design next year or in 2 years chatbots which are having already the mindset in order to talk to somebody else.
Your question is interesting. It needs to be fast, because if you don't do it fast, the big tech will do it for you, for us. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. And maybe that relates to the governance model you mentioned in your presentation as well, Razvan, about the fact that this governance model would help, or the framework, I believe you mentioned, would help actually to achieve this.
Exactly. Yes, but I mean, today the governance is not mature because people don't understand yet how to manage that. They simply not talking about technology. They don't understand the animal. What does it mean, a chatbot, from a service perspective? We take another example from our own garden. Asking it was much easier. Let's put it like that. It was much easier. We built the chatbot in 3 months, the proof of concept, and then industrialization in 6, which is pretty well for a public administration. But now I asked the question came into the workshops to the provider, yeah, with a lot of smart heads around the table. Okay, I said, what are the three, give us the 3 indicators of how to measure a successful experience with the chatbot. Silence. 1 month, 2 months, silence. It took 3 to 4 months to really come to meaningful indicators and eventually link them to the indicators of the web analytics, the experience on the web, on searching, on downloading, on browsing, and something like that. Months.
Thank you. Switching maybe a bit back to, there was a question about MLDKDP and whether we looked into, I think it was ML Croissant that exists in order to develop MLDKDP, or is it something that could be done?
So yes, on the question for ML Croissant, we did actually look into it. And we have performed a formal mapping with the specification. And in this exercise, we did see that perhaps the design philosophy of the specification is a little bit different, where ML Croissant also really focuses on the intricacies of the data. For example, you can describe the file of the data or subsets of the data itself, which really goes into detail there. And we also really focused on the platform approach and the AI Act approach. But then we had a meeting with them, and we saw that, yeah, we can exchange ideas, of course, where they had less information on the AI Act. They were looking to cooperate on exchanging ideas on the responsible AI part that also exists. And of course, yeah, we are always looking to align with different initiatives, make them interoperable as well, and build a community in that way.
Thank you. I think there are questions in the audience.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have tons of questions, but one first comment, because you are introducing MLDKDP. If I'm not wrong, first version is from this May, or this year? Yeah, MLDKDP is from this year.
Yeah.
So I'm stating that because in smart data models, we have machine learning data models since 2021. So possibly you are not aware of that. I think that is not exactly the same, but could be somehow you are looking for adoption or for alignment. Maybe you can profit out of this because they have adoption. And this adoption in this case is based on a European funding. So it was the outcome of a project that they created that model. And I have another question for Jeremy, is how do you manage when the input data is somehow not precise or is faulty or has poor quality? How do you build the knowledge graphs in order to do what you need to do?
We don't take it. We simply don't take it. There is an assessment, a big assessment to be done at human level on the quality of the data, how much it's trusted already by the humans without the AI. If it's not trusted already with the humans, you don't take it into consideration. So there is a big hands-on kind of projects to be done on that. So you need to understand the culture, the flywheel, how people interact with the data already. Put what you do in the AI, what you do in the real world to the level of the AI, so how an AI can answer to basic questions, revenue, costs, or market opportunities, all that kind of stuff. And only then move to the next stage, which is, you were talking about it, I think, simulations. How, if this happens, what happened? And you have a stable model at that point, and you can start, the next level is really simulation, how to simulate new world experiences through the data that you have mapped. So yeah, I guess you don't take the bad data. That's it. Like if you are conscious about what you're doing, better look carefully at what you ingest. Yeah, and there is no secret sauce, I think, for that. You need to just know the environment you're in. Yeah. Yeah, Alberto, to reply to your question. I'm aware of indeed of the machine learning model on smart data models. Indeed, our intention is to map it to it, to see what are common parts or what maybe could be intended for testing for them.
Hello, thank you to all the presenters. My name is Christian. I'm from the Danish Agency for Digital Government. And I have a question for Razvan primarily, but the rest of you are, of course, welcome to answer as well. So I believe that some of the chatbots in use in the Danish public sector are able not just to answer questions, but to go and actually interact with the systems directly, so book an appointment for a citizen. So this, did you consider this angle in your study? Because this poses different types of data being shared between systems and a whole new sort of set of risk questions, right? Not just DDoS, but DDoSing an office in real life, possibly, right? Booking a load of appointments, which might be based on a misunderstanding between chatbots. Yeah.
Thanks, Christian. Yeah, indeed, very specific. The answer is not yet. We definitely look at the angle of security, but from a very wide perspective of not blocking. Now, what the impacts are behind in the second level, no, we didn't consider that, but actually that's the point of me participating here as well, taking your ideas into the study. So if you have others, I will gladly consider them. Definitely there is. Ultimately, every bot does something. It's not there just to chat. If the public administration put a bot, is to solve a problem. Solving a problem means an action. In our case, is finding the legislation or the publication and serve it back. So the same as for the Danish administration blocking the booking system. If 1 million are coming at the same time, it will block our search system or our repository if there are 1 million asking the same question in the same second. So yeah, definitely it's part of the security approach which needs to be considered, and how to handle that, I don't know. But yes, we need to. And if you have the contacts of the people, I would gladly also onboard them, because it's one of the difficulties looking around there. I mean, we look at that level nationally. There are not many. I say there are not many who have it in production, and the information is difficult to find. There is nobody who has a catalog of these are the bots which are provided by European public administrations. And what is a public administration? It's at the government level, it's at the municipality. There are some countries who are doing better at the municipality level than at the national level, and so on and so forth. So it's difficult to get the information. Definitely a call for action to me is, please share with me every information you would have and you think is relevant from your own country, that we can contact the guys and bring them on the table. Yeah.
I remember a small study from SEMIC side on which Emilio worked a lot, looking into. It has a couple of years, but maybe the initiatives are still valid. Yeah, with Australian chatbots and other chatbots.
Yeah, Austria. Yes, we took into consideration Austria. Austria is actually a potential candidate for the proof of concept. I didn't say, but besides the study, we try also to implement the proof of concept. So also showing in a small perimeter that it works. So this is completely open now to see who qualifies and what is the better match, because for a proof of concept, we cannot wait years to. So we need to take two bots which are more or less mature, working already, and also the interoperability levels, the public administrations being ready to support it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a question. Huh? Do you have a little budget? Are you available in the next 6 months? Can you do it? Do you have people?
There was a question online, Razvan, to stay with you about how do you convert your natural language prompt questions to a query that can query your knowledge graph? Do you convert Tor prompt to Sparkle? So I think that would relate to Publio.
Yeah, no. The way we do it in Publio, I can say, but I have two answers for this question. The first one, in Publio, what we do today, the Publio is intent-based. So it's natural language understanding on the phrase and trying to detect the entities, and based on that, the intent of the question. And then there's not a Sparkle, but it's actually a very sophisticated search query which is built. So overall, the chatbot is an assistance in findability, assisting people to find easier using their own natural language instead of just putting them in front of the text box, search text box, and expecting they do miracles. And even if you put there 10 million euros, I can bet with you, you will not have Google-like working in your company. So that's where we started. We started by looking again at the numbers, and we saw that 87% of the users were typing one word in the search box. And we thought we have a pretty decent search system, but with one word, I mean, you can do everything you want in the world. It's one word. So you always have frustrated people, and you will have endless discussion with your colleagues and your superiors and your everywhere. But this is like that. It's not an exact science. So that is precisely the initiating of why do you have, because you need to know why do you build a chatbot, because it's fun. I mean, you can do it, you can try, yeah, but you don't go as a public administration or company to invest money because it's fun or you like to play with LLMs. Do it, but do it in an innovation department. So for us, there was a very natural answer to a problem that we had, which was people typing just one word. And I talked to other people. I talked to Airbus. I talked to Bayer in Germany. They made Roche. And guess what? A lot of big organizations had exactly the same numbers. I remember Airbus had specifically 80 to 81% of the people internally, not even external search. Internally, they were typing one word and expecting the perfect technical specification of Airbus 3020. But it didn't happen. And for them was the same question. There is a reason for that. So it was the point of, okay, if people are typing a word, okay, let's take the initiative and let's not just sit and wait and say we have the perfect search system. No, let's get into conversation with them and ask what are you thinking tonight? What do you feel they are fitting today? What do you want to go? Well, ask questions and then give some hints. Put visually, are you looking for EU law? Yes, no. Are you looking for somebody in the public administration? So starting with questions and entering into conversation, which ultimately leads to an intention, and then which is framed, and behind the system can treat that.
Yeah, and measuring, I guess, monitoring what you develop in order to get information to improve your service.
Absolutely.
Maybe, unless there are questions in the audience, I'll look online and take the two last questions here. Jeremy, there's a question about, will ABI replace traditional business systems like ERP, CRM, or will it more enhance their intelligence?
It's additive to the previous technologies. Like every technology that we have seen, it's always additive to the previous one. So it's not going to replace anything. It's going to just add a new layer to it. And yeah, that's the next stage, because let's be honest, the interfaces of those systems are terrible. And so you want to have a more natural conversation with them and also interact different systems together without having to go through the pain of what I've been doing most of my years working in finance, crunching different data sets together to get an answer 3 weeks later when you want it in 3 seconds.
I can add a word to that. I agree with the addition, but it also drives actually synergies with what you have in place. And one synergy in our case is clearly the search. So actually the chatbot starts driving the search box, because if you add quicker in the chatbot and you are answering the user expectations, then you also need to pull with you the search box, because still majority of people, and will still do in the next years, use the search. So you want that the search box has more or less the same features as the chat itself, even if it's not called chat. But search becomes a chat.
To it, the search is not going to disappear. It's when you know what you know, you go search. When you don't know, you want to chat and figure out what you need to do. I think it's two different user experiences.
And there is a tiny detail to that also about maturity. I think might be changed since then, but March there was not yet 24% of the queries shoot to Google which are natural language type of things. People are still looking for IDs, for one word, for names, for whatever. There's nothing natural there. But it's still a learning curve until users will interact majoritarily through natural language questions. There is still some place. So that's why also other reasons as well, but also search will be there for long term.
And while AI evolves rapidly, human tends to evolve at more slower, or change at a more slower pace most of the cases. I remember statistics internally about 80% don't feel comfortable about their level of data literacy. So I guess there is also a lot of work there to help educate people to actually use the tools that they have to their maximal extent. Maybe last question for our panel is, Jeremy, what team or profiles is needed to put in place an ABI or ABI-like system? As
an AI system in general, I think. Yeah. So right now you have developers. Those developers tend to become more architects, as the AI is also going to help enable more, I think, coding work to be done. So what I see, at least from my tiny window, is a little bit less of developers, more architect kind of people. So yeah, developer and architect being the two main things that you need to have in mind. And then I think a business or an experience-oriented manager that is here for basically managing and sponsoring the initiatives. I think there is three main groups of people: developers, architects, and users, essentially, like users, but they are from different, authority level. Some users will just have to consume. Some will be the users that also wants to put the machine in a certain way. So in a way, it's kind of also a call to action for simplification of what we call the data scientist, a data engineer, a business analyst. It's like either you develop the system, either you architect it, or either you use it and you want it to be managed in a certain way. So that would be the short answer for this kind of question.
Great. And with that, I would like to thank you very much, the four of you, for your presentations and for the answers in this panel. And thank you all for joining. Maybe what we can still show for those who don't need to run, I mentioned earlier that we have a couple of questions for you. So maybe we'll show them quickly. If we can press, I don't know, Emilian, for example, on your side, to launch the questions. So normally for all the people who are already on Slido, you should be able to see the question popping up. One answer, 100%. Ten more seconds, and then we move to not to take too much of your time. All right, so it feels like it's the human factor, no policy. And definitely not a technology problem. Interesting. Great. Let's move to the next. The challenges in accessing the right data for training. We discussed about how to train, fine-tune the models, and so on. There were questions about the quality of the data, for example, from Alberto now. So what are the challenges? So it doesn't feel so much about proprietary restrictions. No one is planning to use AI to do that yet. Great. So it seems like it's really about having accurate, clean, and free from errors. That is very difficult in the different domains. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. We move to the next one. So how can we actually improve that? incentives, publication, so publication seems to be really the first. And there you see open is between brackets because it doesn't mean that that the data needs to be open to be, at least the metadata can be in most cases published. You can have very sensitive data sets, but still the metadata can be non-sensitive, for instance. Okay, all right. Let's move on. Yeah, that might take a while. So I propose to skip just for the sake of time. If you have great use cases, feel of course free to share them with us. Let's finish with this one, I propose. I forgot to say, we'll contact all the organizations or all the people who are below 3. That's a joke. We don't capture you. Great, so mixing, yeah, looks like we have a Gauss curve, or yeah, a bit biased, but towards the second. So, okay, that's why we have this kind of events and workshops to actually share information and how we are all doing in this area. But still some work. Let's see next year where we stand. With that being said, thank you very much for the time.